and social media, then I'm likely to arrest it. We can. So funny. I made my
Out of city.
There we go.
Waiting on.
I don't know whether they don't like it, but.
Yeah. Well, how could you not? I mean,
I got this shuttle here
5, 6.
Sure y'all. And
Exactly.
White Express to get me back to.
Yeah.
Well, absolutely. A lot of turn.
Oh, Nick, not a voting member.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I was like, man,
Come in, they get benefits. Safe.
I wish he'd want to see more with the Cowboys.
Waiting on Fred.
I do.
Yeah, it's, I don't know why, Stephen, some beautiful area.
Do a good terrible. For some reason,
Yeah.
nobody likes it.
Yeah.
It's good.
In the white shirt. And Matthew.
FY 24-20.
So I guess.
Apply for project
For this season. And
Tight ends are one good.
That's what I heard. And I was on the
Special
panel
team guy.
interviewing, and at the end of the interview, what did you expect? Somebody.
I'm saying you're a voting member. You can vote.
because he'll be.
Yes, yeah. We're gonna let the last person interview, then we'll go.
We had an interview, so he can.
Yeah.
Same like
Good running back.
Right.
Same for this from.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it all just.
Like,
Yeah, it's.
We're gonna start then.
oh.
I will call this meeting to order at 9:02. Can we start with a roll call and determination of quorum? Mr. Connor Anderson.
Matthew Lehane,
Here.
Paul Agnello,
You're.
Jamie Jackson,
Here.
I don't need you guys to sign.
Ryan Council,
I didn't think so.
Mike Fincham, Fowler, Amy Garbarini, Kate Gibson,
Here.
Stephen Haynes,
Here.
Christine Hefner, Daniel Koenig, Nick Miner,
Here.
Stephen Miner, Nick Ruiz,
Here.
Bob Schneider, Michelle Shropshire,
Here.
Rodney White,
Here.
Capella Bari, Lee Anderson, Mohammed Benamar, Chelsea Betas, Kimberly Cook, Mike Craig, Adam Derrick, Susan Gardner,
Here.
Todd Horsley, Jacob Passwick, Craig Pennington, Greg Reed, Joe Stansby. We have a quorum.
All right, thank you. We'll now move on to item number 3, approval of the August 7th, 2023 Technical Advisory Committee agenda. Do you have a motion for approval? Paul?
So I had I would like to pull this kind of consent agenda 6B off.
Okay. We can move that to just the first item under action and discussion items.
Sure.
We also have a query on 6C. The financial years in the resolution are not the same as the financial years on the tip blocks that we got. John asked that we maybe pull that one as well.
This is an item that needs to be approved today.
John?
It's a tip modification, so, but it'll be going, VDOT's requested a resolution from the policy committee, so yes.
It's a type 1
Yes.
resolution.
I don't know. I don't know if it's a request to.
We can probably deal with it quite quickly. It's just that the dates don't match and we need to just
Move it under action and discussion items as well. With that, do you have a motion to approve the
Item B. The consumer benefit for the river crossing. That's not gonna be an issue to the benefit this time.
Aye.
Yeah. Not be that typical. It's not be that typical. Yes.
Well, we sent it to you beforehand to tell you that we're going to do this and we got no reply.
Okay. But you still can't. I said that you have to, I put it in and I'm trying to get it as fast as I can. So it on a fast track. But
Right, we'll pull it for today.
All right. With those two updates, pulling item number 6B and moving item number 6C to the action and discussion items. Do I have a motion for approval?
Motion for approval.
Paul, do I have a second?
Second.
Nick? All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Item number 4, review of the June 26, 2023 Policy Committee meeting. Mr. Ian Allis.
Thanks, Chair. Excuse me, it's been a while. So this is just a quick refresh, but as you know, I don't like to belabor this point. It's just to update those folks who weren't able to attend the meeting. And it's the June meeting. We started off with a joint meeting with the GWRC board to look at the smart scale new criteria or proposed criteria. The end result of that was that the FAMPA Policy Committee decided to send a letter, but not the resolution that was attached, just the letter to the Secretary for Transportation. The GWRC board did not make any decision because they lost their quorum before the decision was taken, and so they didn't have enough members in the room to make a decision. So only FAMPA sent a letter. Scroll down, please. There was a TIP amendment changing project groupings. The UPWP was finally adopted. The new TIP, the 24 to 27 TIP, was adopted and is now live. That's the TIP we're now falling under. And the river crossing study report was adopted. My administrative report is online. You're welcome to read it there. I'm not going to rehash it now. The next 4 resolutions under 9A, the a number of the at-large members of the TAC had not renewed their membership of the TAC or been reappointed for some time, and so to get them reappointed to the TAC, we brought resolutions to the policy committee to do that, and the policy committee decided to reappoint all 4 of them. So that was then we moved on to looking at the FAMPA vision. We had some land use maps which were very well received, trying to put on one map the basic zoning and land use of initially the 5 GWRC member localities zoning maps, merge those into one so that you could see the regional impact of zoning. Then had a discussion of what the priorities should be for a FAMPA vision, and briefly discussed future funding, but no decisions were made on any of that. Then comments by policy committee members on the fact that we do seem to have, in fact, used the word sprawl, but they talked about residential land use going what they call flat, further out and not very dense. So effectively, that is sprawl, and that raises some concerns about the cost of transportation projects in the future, roadways, transit, etc. We then approved the new slate of officers in the new year, and Supervisor Meg Blomke was elected the FAMPA chair. Laurie Hayes is the first vice chair from Spotsylvania, and Jason Friend, the second vice chair from the city of Fredericksburg. And we had a resolution recognizing the service of our chair, and some correspondence items. So that's just a very quick summary.
Okay, thank you. We'll now move on to item number 4, review of item number 5, public comment. Comments and questions from members of the public are welcome at this time. Staff will also, if any, comments submitted by the public prior to the meeting. Any public comment? All right, you'll have 3 minutes.
Sure. Just a few things. First of all, I was separate with the 12 England One Lane in Fredericksburg. Number one, I was hoping that there might be some sort of status update regarding whether or not they have a river crossing, where it stands right now. Anything might actually take place. Secondly, a clarification. I was just wondering if the question was, can a curved or arcing path be considered perpendicular to a straight line? Geometry, I remember, was I would say basically no. I do understand that a tangent to that curve. And specifically, if a bridge was curved, can that be considered perpendicular to the road? And then number three, just to kind of alert you, 17 in the I-95 intersection, which formerly was a full cloverleaf, but is now a half cloverleaf, with the parts that are no longer cloverleaf lead into a traffic light north or south off of 95 as they exit. And thus far, I've witnessed very substantial congestion at times due to the result of the I-95 exiting traffic, especially the traffic in the exiting northbound ones. It fills the space between the two traffic lights, which are on opposite sides of I-95, which prevents any through traffic that was going on Route 70. I know that timing for the lights will be adjusted and so forth, but I'm just very concerned that the amount of exiting traffic off of 95 is going to continue at times during the days to cause tremendous congestion. And that's whether or not I-95 is having.
Thank you. Any other public comments? If not, we will close the public comment section and move on to the approval of the consent agenda. I will note this is the consent agenda minus item 6B, which was pulled, and minus item 6C, which was moved to the action and discussion items. So this would be consent agenda approval for item 6A and 6D.
A motion to approve.
Motion to approve. Any second?
Second.
Second. All right. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes. All right, we'll now move on to action and discussion items. We'll start with item 6C.
John, do you just want to address that?
This is a question for VDOT. On the tip box that we received, it was for FY 21 through 24, that submitted after we've moved through 24, 27. Are you looking to retroactively try to revise the tip for FY 24, 27? Or is this supposed to be for FY 24 and 27?
The one that we got for C,
Yes. It was,
should be what they sent.
I think that
okay,
we
so
think
in the
that's
step workflow, it's not populating anything. This was a separate email that we
Okay.
moved forward. So we just want to clarify that it was submitted after we've already moved to our new tip. And I'm just trying to make sure for clarity that we're going to do it the right way.
Ready to email central office about the river one. I will double check on that.
And we can make the corrections for the policy committee.
so that where does that leave us in terms of moving this item forward today on the agenda? Do we pull it, or do you want us to ask the TAC to endorse it now with an amendment, or?
I mean, you can, that one was sent to you by them. So
But
I would say go ahead.
it's wrong.
Enforce it.
It's wrong.
And then we will check, I'll check with them on the dates right now.
So we will amend our date.
Because they sent, central office is the one that sent it to you. So,
I don't think they've realized that we're on a new tip. I think that's the problem.
well, I hope they do. But I'm just a little bit in the love sending that, so I will ask that question.
So are we approving this today or
You're endorsing it.
or endorsing it? Yeah.
You're endorsing the money, where the money will land.
So does are we saying that the TAC should endorse the project and we will, before the policy committee meeting, get feedback from VDOT as to what the date is? Because if we don't, we might be approving the wrong one.
So this is a question for Susan, like it's possible we'll kind of, you have like more information in a little while, like in an hour?
It all depends on somebody recent emails. I'm emailing them right now. I don't know. I can try to get hold of somebody down in the ship.
Again, I was wondering like if we should table this to later in the meeting, but maybe that would not make a difference.
We can table it to the last item of the agenda.
Okay.
All right, moving on to item 7A. This is endorse a GDC resolution approving or authorizing staff to execute contract with VHB for the University Comprehensive Safety Action Plan.
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you, members of the TAC. We sent the final corrected resolution with an email that has the resolution authorizing staff, and this is a GWRC resolution. So we're looking for TAC's endorsement of that to award the contract with Van Ness, Hagen, and Breslin. Have attached to the amended supplemental item their initial task order or final task order and their quote. I'll be glad to answer any questions. Yes, Paul.
So I had a kind of questions and I had sent just kind of sheet with the awards.
We've got that. Or you want us to bring up your document?
Yeah, that,
Okay.
great, and just go to the Virginia portion, which is near the end of that.
Yeah, we've got it up for you.
So the question I had is, it seems like a lot of the other applicants in Virginia asked for a lot more money than we did, and not necessarily bigger areas. So I guess the question is why was that? And then with regards to this contract, like, isn't the total amount of money available was 120,000? It seems like we're not actually using all of that. Like, why are we not using all of the money that we have?
Yeah, I'll be glad to answer. VDOT, thanks to Linda Lasute, about, I want to say almost a year ago, let us know that the HSIP folks, Stephen Reed and company, were going around to the planning district commissions and MPOs to do their safety analysis portion of the safety action plan. And we were fortunate enough for that stage of the action plan component to be completed by VDOT in time, so that when we applied for the grant with the U.S. Department of Transportation, we were able to save, we estimate, almost $30,000 of the cost of that action plan component, since VDOT has completed that for us. And our grant application included not only the consultant work, but staff time to hold the workshops that are going to be necessary to bring in stakeholder groups to develop a comprehensive safety action plan. So the real meat of the safety action plan is bringing in the state police, the local police, the sheriff's office, the educators, everybody that it takes to put together an ongoing, forever comprehensive safety action plan that incorporates behavioral countermeasures in addition to infrastructure countermeasures. You'll see in the resolution that the amount that we budgeted in the initial DOT grant application, we are going to need to request a transfer from staff expenses to cover the amount of the $85,000 figure. So we are going to be adjusting the amount in the grant application. And the reason the consultant's cost is greater than our initial grant request, we have 2 additional tools to use to prioritize projects. The Safer Streets Priority Finder model that we used for our grant application case study, and also the training and so forth, dealing with finding low-cost countermeasures on 2-lane roads on the secondary system. So they have some additional analysis to take the safety action plan that found the high injury networks using very high level analysis that VDOT's using statewide, and then bringing it down to the local level. And that's the reason for those differences.
So staff are planning to spend about $35,000 in staff time. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, it includes fringe and indirect, remember, so
Yep.
and that's to facilitate those workshops. We're required to set up a panel, and we'll discuss with the TAC at the time, what that panel should look like. But we're supposed to have a panel that is supposed to be kind of semi-permanently in existence to monitor the implementation of the ongoing measures to reduce traffic incidents and crashes and deaths on the road and that kind of thing. And that has to, as Becky just indicated, include your emergency services and police and that kind of thing. So they're supposed to be involved because they know the roads and they know where the problem areas are. It's one of the requirements of the grant that you set up this panel, and we have to facilitate that panel and so on. So it doesn't end when you finish the document. It's not here's your document, it's done. It's an ongoing panel that has to meet to check that the localities are actually starting to implement the projects that they've committed to implement.
So going back to my original question, so it sounds like we're seeking to use 20, but I guess in this resolution, and this resolution is not on the agenda for FAMPA, right? It's on the GWC agenda.
So we're going to show it to FAMPA because we don't believe doing anything in the dark is a good idea. So we do make everybody aware. So we're not going to hide anything from anybody.
So does this have like the 35,000 going to staff? Like, is that one of the whereas clauses?
I don't know that it's actually in the resolution, but it's in
It says,
the UP.
whereas at the very bottom of the first page, Connor, the GWRC will request a project budget amendment from the U.S. Department of Transportation to transfer 8,000 from salaries, fringe, indirect to consulting services for an approved consulting services budget of $85,000.
It is mentioned in the UPWP that some of that goes to other needs.
Maybe I did my math wrong, but staff is planning to spend $8,000.
No, we're taking 8,000 away from staff and
Okay.
giving it to the consultant total because the final consultant quote was higher than their initial quote.
Okay, their initial quote was 77,000.
It was.
It's now 85,000.
Now it's 85,000, and in fact, both consultants' final offer was exactly 85,000. So they were cost-wise, they were both the same, and we picked this one.
So was the issue that basically the grant application had 43,000 for staff, 77,000 for consultant, and then we're rectifying this to 85, 35?
Correct. It's staff, and also like if we have to offer refreshments, let's say we have to get the police and the emergency services here for a protracted meeting, and we need to offer them sandwiches, coffee, whatever else. We don't know if there are other expenses associated with running those committees. So we had to guesstimate before when we sent in the federal grant application. So that's how we just asked for a bit extra to facilitate those additional arrangements. Remember, no one's done this before. This is the first round when MPOs are doing this. There are a lot of unknowns, and that level of unknown answers partly your other question, Paul. Why did they ask for such vastly different amounts of money? No one's done this before, so we don't know exactly what the requirements are other than the documents that the federal government has published. So it immediately left us with a list of questions. What about cost estimates for the projects? So we have added into our consultant scope the need to do cost estimates for the projects, because after you finish this action plan, then you can start with implementation grants, which means you pick the first 5 or whatever projects, and you now apply for the funding to build those 5 projects. But how can you apply for the funding if you don't know how much the project is going to cost? So we've put in there that we need to have planning level cost estimates for those projects so that we know how much to apply for the implementation grants. Yes, there's 1 or 2 very, very big or those MPOs that have applied for very big amounts, large amounts. My guess is that they're also doing engineering of individual projects in addition to the action plan. In other words, they've made this action plan of a study that engineers turning lanes and all that kind of thing, which we didn't apply for. We didn't ask for engineering money as part of the action plan. We asked for the money to do an action plan. So I think those very big ones have applied for money to do engineering, but I don't know that for a fact. We haven't gone and read every application from all of those other applicants.
In terms of the benefit that Becky mentioned, that kind of VDOT to GWC, didn't they give that benefit to the MPOs or PDCs that wanted it?
No, they had funding for I think 3, and Linda explained this to us back then. They had funding to do 2 or 3 only, and they picked us as one of the 3. And initially it was for FAMP, and we asked them to expand it to include the 2 GWRC rural localities, so they expanded it to do 5. So that was a benefit which they gave to only 3 regions in Virginia. There wasn't funding to do all of them.
Okay, so the reason why we think that ours is less is because we are not doing like engineering of alternatives. We got this benefit, which obviously most of the other areas did not get.
We got the 30,000. What was the VDOT one called?
Our safety analysis, traffic safety analysis plan, traffic safety plan.
So that traffic safety plan was done for us and 2 other regions, and we did not have to pay for it. VDOT had an internal grant for $30,000 to do our one, and we were just glad that they were able to do that. So it cut a big chunk of the analysis out of this project. We didn't have to do.
And I guess like what's the schedule for safety action plan?
So it will start as soon as we've got it all approved. So we have to go through all the approvals, one of which is this resolution. And then we have to sign the, so we need to approve the task order and then sign the agreement with the relevant consultant. And so this has to go to the GWRC board meeting, so they will make such approval. And assuming all the other items are done, then Chip will be able to sign the agreement with the consultant, and they can then start.
And
This does not.
task order provides a schedule.
This does not need to be in our tip because it's technically the grant was given to GWRC, not to FAMPO, so it doesn't have to be in our tip.
And just one item of concern, applications will likely open next spring for Safe Streets for All. Will we have some sort of results by then to have the knowledge to move forward with an application or 2 for each locality?
Yes, the deliverables call for the infrastructure countermeasures to be completed toward the end of this calendar year. That has order of magnitude costs for those infrastructure countermeasures. It will include, for example, not only the location, but will have a cost for systemic signage, a cost for improved 2-lane road with paved shoulder. And then it will include not only the order of magnitude cost, but the value of the crash reduction benefit for each countermeasure. And that would allow localities to then consider infrastructure applications for the July of 2024 implementation grant deadline for SS4A.
I must just say, bear with us because there's no history here. No one's done this before, and this grant is new. And because the grant is new, grant documents don't answer a lot of questions that we have. So, for example, cost estimates. The actual action plan grant doesn't even require you to do that. We've added it in because we don't see how you can get from an action plan to an application for project money if you don't have cost estimates. So we've pushed for that. We've added that in, and one of our consultants looked at us and said, "You don't need to do that. It's not required." And we said, "Well, we don't care. We require it because if we have to then go to 2 localities and say, hey, we want to put in sidewalks or whatever it is, you have to have a cost estimate. Otherwise, how are you going to apply for the grants?" So we've added that in. But the actual action plan grant documents, the NOFO, etc., it does not have a lot of specificity as to what has to be included. It's gives options. You can do this and you can do that, but surely, you must have a cost estimate. Otherwise, you're going to waste your time doing this action plan.
So my last question or thought that I'll just bring up to TAC as well. Obviously, the culmination of this plan will be a federal grant application. I'm not sure how other localities have done it, but writing the grant applications does require quite a bit of time and staff time or consultant time. So maybe we could set aside, if available, some STBG money to have a consultant for each locality write a grant application.
So I'm not opposed to that, but that obviously is a decision that has to get taken when we do STGP.
Just a thought.
And our new methodology says that before we close the call for projects, that the TAC must suggest if we have any special requests,
That is a special request, yeah.
or money or that kind of thing. So at that point, we would need to hear whether the TAC supports that and make that an issue. I don't have any objections.
Just something I wanted to throw out there, can be discussed at future TAC meetings. Obviously, if anybody has any thoughts now. So if nothing else on that, we are endorsing, or do I have a motion to endorse TDC Resolution 24-1, authorizes to execute a contract with VHB for the TDC Comprehensive Safety Action Plan?
Motion to approve.
Paul, I have a second.
Sorry.
Okay, Nick is seconding. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. On to item 7B, Transportation Alternatives TAP submissions.
And Connor, I'll just ask you to advance slides as we go.
Chairman, just to clarify, Carrie has prepared 2 sets of slides, but she is on summer vacation leave, and so other staff, Becky, will just deliver the presentation.
Good morning. I'm filling in for Carrie Eves today to brief the TAC on this year's Transportation Alternative Project submissions. Next slide. The TAP program caps total project costs of $2.5 million, requires a 20% local match, requires independent utility with logical start and end points, and the project must be in public use within 4 years from the initial funding award. Next slide. This slide lists the requirements for TAP applications. Today, we'll be seeking TAC's endorsement of a FAMPO resolution for Stafford and Spotsylvania County projects, and the GWRC is working with King George County to process a resolution for their project on their September agenda. Next slide. This slide lists the projects for the 3 counties. We'll see a slide for each of these today. Next slide. The Smith Station Road shared use path gap closure provides about 1,800 feet of new shared use path between a developer constructed facility along the Smith Station Road frontage of Portland Park to Levels Road. There's an existing shared use path along Spotsylvania Parkway that traverses across US Route 1 to the Spotsylvania Medical Center. Next slide. The Chancellor Park Drive TAP project connects the Saddle Creek residential development sidewalks to the Chancellor Middle School and includes developer funds to complete the facility. Next slide. The King George County TAP project is proposed to construct about 600 feet of 5-foot wide sidewalk from the primary Route 3, Kings Highway, to the King George Middle School. The sidewalk is on school property, but will require utility relocation. There's a pedestrian crosswalk across Kings Highway to the Arnold's Corner Shopping Center area that has installed sidewalk with that development. Modification to the existing traffic signal is included in the project estimate to provide pedestrian crossing controls for the crosswalks. Next slide. The Mine Road, Green Spring Road TAP project for Stafford County provides crosswalks across all 4 legs of the intersection and connects the existing Mine Road sidewalk system to the sidewalks of the Walmart Supercenter to the west and the existing sidewalks along Green Spring Road to the east. Next slide. This project installs 1 new crosswalk across US Route 1 north of Austin Park Drive and Forest and Woods Drive. one new crosswalk across Foreston Woods Drive east of Sousa Drive, and a new crosswalk across Sousa Drive. There is new sidewalk between US Route 1 and Sousa Drive is also included. There is an existing sidewalk along the south side of Foreston Woods Drive between the two red lines. Next slide. This project will install new sidewalk and crosswalks at Kings Highway and Chatham Heights Road and along the frontage of the Sight Laser Vision Center and Clear Care Dental Office to connect the existing sidewalk system that is shown in red. Next slide. The FAMPO resolution in your pack will be taken to the Policy Committee in August. The GWRC resolution for King George County will be introduced to the board in August and taken to the board for their approval in September, provided that the King George County Board of Supervisors approves the project and their 20% local match. Final applications with local and regional endorsements are due by October 2nd. That concludes my presentation.
All right, any discussion?
I had a question on slide 2. Slide 2. The question is that 2.5 million project lifetime cap, is that only for new projects or is that retroactive to existing projects? I ask because we have an existing project that already has 2.5 million that we're asking for more money.
I'm not sure.
Okay. Sure.
Thank
Thank you.
Any other discussion or questions for staff? Yes.
Paul's not good at leaving money on the table.
You're right. Do not deny it.
All right.
Just teasing.
So we have two resolutions on the table. We'll start with the first one for FAMPO. Endorse resolution 24-03 for FAMPO of resolution support for the Stafford and Spotsylvania 2023 TAP project applications for FY 25 and 26 funding.
Motion to approve.
Do you have a second? I'll second. Any discussion? All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. And then the second item, endorse judiciary resolution for King George County TAP applications for FY 25-6.
Motion to approve.
And I'll second as well. All right. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to item 7C.
When I asked Carrie to prepare these slides, she looked at me and said, well, we know nothing. because the CTP is discussing significant potential changes. So the slides tell us only what we do know and ask some questions about what we don't yet know. But we do need to make the point that we have to get our localities to start preparing projects. We can't wait, even though we don't know the final set of rules that we're going to be governed by. We have to start getting at least project ideas together, start looking at drawings and cost estimates. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm filling in for Carrie Hughes today on our round 6 smart scale application process. Next slide. I'd like to point out this slide is different than the one in your packet. Stephen helped us with what's bolded at the end, which is very important, the pre-application deadline. The round 6 miles timeline is shown on this slide. We hope that everyone is developing their list of candidate regional projects for the pre-scoping process. Next month, we'll develop the list of regional projects that will be submitted in November to the pre-scoping portal. Between December of this year and March of 2024, we'll be coordinating with VDOT and localities to make the pre-application deadline of March 31st. Next slide. Most of you are aware of some concerns voiced by OIP and the Commonwealth Transportation Board with application quality and scoring factors. Mr. Ollis is going to discuss a survey next to get MPO's feedback on the staff recommended changes to address these concerns. Next slide. That concludes my presentation.
I think the key message is please everybody start preparing projects. Doesn't matter, we shouldn't take the view that we're going to wait until we have all the information before we start at least developing concepts. So I think to wait will mean that we're going to have a mad scramble to try and come up with projects when we know the criteria. I think we should just have some roadway projects, maybe 1 or 2 transit or bike bed projects ready, so that when we do know the full extent of the details, you can, pick from those projects that you already start preparing. One might fall off. I get that. I get you might do a little bit of work on a project that you might end up not using, but that's always the case, right? Because we always have to remove one when we go from 5 to 4. This time we might be going from 4 to 3. We don't know. But anyway, I really would encourage you all to start preparing project ideas, at least project ideas, and start looking at the extent of the project, like from where to where, and so that when we get to September, we've at least got our initial ideas ready.
So pre-app deadline is the March 31st.
Yes.
And then the full deadline is when?
In August.
August 1st. Okay, so it's
And
same
that's,
timeline.
those are tentative dates.
Okay.
They could change. That's what we know based on previous that has not been updated.
So is there also a district kind of deadline in October just to get assistance?
Well, what we're doing is very strongly encouraging the use of the pre-scoping form. As you call in round 5, we used an intake form that we had developed ourselves. Within the portal, you can go in at any time and start a project. If you want assistance from VDOT, we require that to be done. So in most cases, we would expect to see a pre-scope. Now, there are exceptions that, like if you have a study underway and it's going to feed a pre-app, you don't necessarily have to go that route. But that will be our expectation. And the good thing is you can do that today. So as far as when we need information, again, the October-November timeframe would be good if you have your kind of your scope of your projects identified. I know that in particular in Spotsylvania, we have so many studies that it may look different for you guys than some of the other localities who don't have as many studies this round. They'll probably be looking at their earlier projects that maybe failed to be submitted or funded, or they may look at in new locations. And I think that's what Ian's alluding to, is that we need to work together to consider which of those might be good projects, what they'll look like. But the best way is to get that initial input into that pre-scoping form, and we can begin to analyze it. That way, when pre-scoping rolls around and you submit that, and immediately you're going to get hit with risk of screen out. This is missing, that's missing. We can go ahead and have most of that done ahead of time. It will decrease the heartache and the heartburn and make everybody's job easier. And it's as simple as getting those in earlier. So I understand there are situations where we won't know until we're closer to pre-app, but that's what we'd like to see.
And this is 2930 money? Oh, I'm sorry, Paul.
I was going to ask, just like with the pipeline studies, if we have like, Route 3 pipeline study project we want to do, but we're not sure exactly what we want to do, if we indicate that in October, November, and when the study gets farther along, we could say we want that one.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And it's 29 and 30 money, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So for the regional project, should we be? Sure.
Connor, could we go back to the timeline slide? Right, sorry, Paul.
So I guess like if we want to have, concepts to get VDOT in October, November, should we, like in the late summer, be kind of meeting to talk about what regional projects might be?
I would suggest we do that in September. At this stage, I'm not sure that the localities have got their ideas ready to bring to that meeting. So I would suggest in September we do that. Gives everybody a month to still think about the projects they want to submit on their local list and what projects they think might be good for a regional list.
So we're planning to have an item at the TAC agenda to talk further. in September, or?
You can do that.
Sorry, I'm not saying we should. I'm just wondering what the process is for that.
Well, I think Paul's suggesting that we have a separate meeting to talk about that. Or did you mean at the
I've
TAC?
been on the way. I mean, we could do it at the TAC, but I don't know if the separate meeting just sounds like it's August already, so. September.
Can I offer a suggestion, just given how difficult it's been with these separate meetings and the CMAQ process? Could we do it as part of the TAC meeting in September?
Yep.
If that's not too much of a imposition. Yeah. I mean, I think it's just more productive when everyone's here.
I'm also going to be suggesting to the policy committee that we change our bylaws or pass a separate resolution to allow FAMPO committees to meet occasionally online when we have that kind of problem. There is now new material in the FOIA process that does allow for certain online meetings under certain circumstances. And I do think we should relook at that, because I think we don't actually vote, right? The TAC doesn't actually vote. So I would imagine that provided we follow all the FOIA rules, we would be able to find a way to occasionally have subcommittee meetings online.
Mhm.
You don't all have to physically come here, but we can actually have the meeting online. But we need to do it properly. We need to have a proper resolution or amend the bylaws properly so that we can do that. But I really would urge FAMPO to start finding ways to make that occasionally possible, particularly for subcommittees. You know, for a formal meeting where you're going to vote, yes, be here. But if it's a subcommittee that's investigating the options, I'm sure we can move that to an online meeting, but we probably need to make an amendment. So
We'll plan to have something at the September TAC meeting, an agenda item to discuss this further. Maybe staff can come back with a request for localities to do whatever is needed on staff's end.
Yeah, we'll raise it again at the September meeting.
Say, I like the idea of meeting at this September TAC as well. Should meet at 9.
Yep.
Smartsville, we might need to look now.
So, question for the good of the group, since most TAC members are here. Does anyone have an issue with meeting at 9? So we met at 9 today.
And devoting up to an hour discussing smart scale regional projects, etc.
Maybe less.
What's the
But the
rest of the agenda shaping up to be next month? Is there a lot of other stuff?
Well, we're going to get those, hopefully, tip blocks from Susan to all of the projects, which, you know, the policy committee approved funding for projects, CMAC and SDGB and CRP and all those other funding streams in, was it May or June? So those all have to become, they'll have to get a UPC and they all have to get tip blocks and they all have to be put into the tip. So those are going to come. However, I guess that apart from crossing, I don't think there's probably going to be a lot of discussion about those. I think those are probably just going to be
Yeah, so we'll plan for some time at the TAC meeting in September. Hopefully, a lot less than an hour, but we'll plan to go from there.
So, if there's any, we ran into a little bit of an issue right at the last minute with our TAP and application as far as permissions in the portal with one of our localities. Please go in and log into the portal and see that you're able to get there, that you're able to access those particular, and for example, Matthew, Paul, I know both of y'all certainly have access to everything, but if anyone else is going to assist, make sure, you know, just let me know if everyone doesn't have the appropriate permissions, because we don't want that to interfere. I think we're fine in the city too. I think Mike's got everything, but I think Jamie should too. So, but if you would just make sure that, you know, we're not going to be surprised at the end, you know, at pre-app, someone doesn't have the permissions they need. Thank you.
the other potential thing, depending on how the discussion goes today with the CMAC STGB methodology, that might come up again in September. Depends on where we get to today.
Okay. One other thing, I was, and we can talk offline, but I was thinking I might ask to do a little brief presentation on the VRE system plan in September. We're most of the way through phase 2, so 15-minute presentation.
Sure.
So I guess I had a question like with Vanpil, like there was the link to that, like, I don't know, Mike, Peter can bring it up, like what is the rest of Vanpil's smart scale changes?
So we haven't got to that item yet, but
So we
if
can
we go there
move on
now.
to C1, yeah.
Okay, so
Here's your survey.
thank you. The survey, what I would like to do is to actually fill this in right now in the meeting, because I don't want to speak on behalf of FAMPO on my own. I don't think that's appropriate. However, they have a deadline for the survey that would be before the policy committee meeting. So I can't wait until the policy committee
Just
meeting.
keep on going now. It's just, it should be in there.
So
Survey?
there you go. So I took our concerns about the new proposed changes to Smart Scale to VAMPO, and we had some discussion. Various members of VAMPO gave opinions at their last meeting, and then they agreed to send the survey out. It's a very high-level survey asking for feedback on the changes, and they asked us to get it back to them quite soon because they want to combine all the surveys and take it to the VAMPO board and then send that to the C2B. So we're under a time deadline, but I didn't want to fill this in on your behalf. So if we can, Mr. Chair, just go through these quickly. It's a lot of yes, no's. So the first question is, for Tier 1 entities, the application cap would be reduced from 4 applications to 2 applications. For Tier 2, the application would be reduced from 10 to 5. Do you support the proposed reduction in the application cap?
No.
I'm guessing we say no, right? So Connor, if you can just tick no. Do we want to add any comment?
Well, maybe would it be helpful, that letter that was submitted? Because wasn't there some detail of what the body disagreed with specifically? We could just use some of that text.
Sure, we can add it in after the meeting if you want.
Yeah, just to be consistent.
It's the letter.
Yeah, or just say, yeah, please see letter, and then,
Yeah, see FAMPO letter, just
yeah,
right there, see FAMPO letter to the secretary.
just so we're not saying something different from what
Letter to the secretary for transportation.
And the date was June 26th.
June.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, next one. Question 2. To facilitate application readiness, the Commonwealth, the CTB is considering processes that will require final applications to be complete prior to submission and changing terminology for the pre-screening review from condition screening in to conditional screening out. This would mean that all resolutions, approvals, report, detailed project schedules, cost estimates, and other required attachments would need to be completed prior to the submission of the final application, could not be added later. Proposed. Do you support the proposed process changes related to application submissions?
No.
And what's the reason we don't support it?
Well, the concern, like with the resolutions, I guess I'll use that as an example, like those require like the leverage funding. A lot of times, like we get the cost estimates from VDOT like a day or two. Basically, they require board approval. Can't kind of basically by the deadline. Need more time in the resolutions.
Well, anybody have a different view?
I mean, I'd second what Paul said. It's like when we go to our board, we have to have the exact amount or less. And if we don't have all the funding mix,
Yeah, the thought is,
By the deadline.
assuming, VDOT and OIP processes can keep up the Smart Scale deadline, it is no issue. But the past 5 rounds, a lot of that stuff has come in right at the end or after the deadline.
So click no, I would suggest, Mr. Chair, and then we put a note that support letters take time to process through boards and committees after cost estimates have been finalized. Does that sound?
Maybe just like add resolutions, like support letters and resolutions.
Okay,
Yeah.
support letters and resolutions.
And that's important because your objection is only to that part. I mean, the detailed schedules and cost estimates, we should have tied down pretty firmly, but those have never, I don't know that there have been any problems receiving those a month later, the resolutions. It's kind of like there's 2 different things there, and it's good to specify which one we actually object to.
I think we put it in there.
Yeah.
The next one, the third one, to address project cost overruns and scheduling delays for locally administered projects that have received funding, the CTB is considering tying consensus funding decisions to entity performance in delivery. Do you support the proposed change to tie consensus funding decisions to performance in delivering projects?
No.
So I guess I had a question of just what it means. I mean, this means like if you have a smart scope project before that you administer it and you don't do it on time, then basically you can't receive funding.
That's what it sounds like to me. I don't know.
Anything on the dashboard.
Sustainability, performance metrics that have been talked about, CTB.
So what if the locality has VDOT administered? Would they still be penalized for this?
No. It could be local.
Yep, I think the answer is no.
But I think some of that comes with how it's looking at VDOT.
So I guess I'm just trying to understand what smart scope, like, is VDOT not wanting to administer the smart scope projects as much going forward?
No, I don't think we're looking to take over projects. It's just, there is as you mentioned, the CTV meeting, there, the locally administered program is quite large. And it has performance issues in certain areas,
Delays.
delays with some legacy projects that have, statewide, there are a particular president of CTV Fredericksburg that was talked about. As the commissioners determined, there's some bad actors across the state that have notoriously not delivered on their project. Trying to make sure it's corrected because they large piece of the unspent allocation. They spent. I think they're trying to tie the performance with the award of the projects to look.
I think it's clear that there are some delays that certain localities have allowed to happen. I don't think there's a question of whether that has happened. The question is whether we would support that becoming a measure that penalizes your future funding because you didn't get your projects done on time in the past.
So my comment, Mr. Chair, is I agree with everything you said, Michelle. I mean, City of Fredericksburg is, a locality that has had those specific challenges. But I think for me, the answer is no, just because you could be newer to the locality and then be penalized for the junk you got when you got here. So that would just be my comment for no, not because I don't think localities should perform. I just think it sets up not only staff, but also administrations up for just bad performance that is not theirs.
The other question I have is for how long do you get penalized, right? So you make a mistake on a project, do you get penalized forever? Because that project, I mean, you'd find probably most localities made a hash of a project.
So it'll work likely based on the VDOT dashboard. And once a project is removed from the dashboard, then you're not penalized anymore.
Well, that's what I'd like to see in writing because I would be concerned about saying yes, and then I get penalized for 100 years. Right?
A lot of the issue is, I think a lot of the issue here is there's limited details on some of these proposals. We're going to find details in November, December, and then it's going to be approved without comment.
So,
that could be the comment there.
So why don't we put in under comments, we need more information?
Yep.
I
No?
disagree. I don't think it's needed more information. I think I disagree with the policy no matter what.
Okay.
It's not more information on my end, at least. I don't know if TAC has any thoughts either way on that.
Do we agree on no?
Yes.
Yes.
We agree.
Okay, so we agree on no.
Yes, we agree on no.
We don't agree on the comment. So I think let's just leave it and move on in the interest of time. Okay, 4, to better capture future impacts of project implementation on congestion impacts, the CTB is considering using 10-year future growth to determine congestion benefit scores instead of the current congestion conditions. Do you support using the 10-year future growth conditions to determine project congestion benefits? I'm inclined to
I
not
think,
oppose this.
yeah, yes.
I think this is a yes.
Yes.
I think that would help us because our congestion is going to get worse and worse and worse. And if we can reflect that, it could help us.
And I'll say today, basically, it's not basically really the present, it's really a couple of years in the past.
Yep.
So we're like the fastest growing, I think, PDC or, in the state. We're definitely at a disadvantage.
Yeah.
Fastest growing PDC since 1960.
Right.
And you get the money in year 4 and 5, or year 5 and 6 rather.
By then,
It's a couple years until 10 years out. So yeah.
exactly. 5, to address concerns that the high priority program is being used to implement small projects that don't have meaningful impacts on the improvement of corridors of statewide significance or regional networks, the CTB is considering limiting projects that are eligible to receive funding through the HPP to the following types: new capacity highway, managed lanes, new or improved interchanges, new or improved passenger rail stations or service, freight rail improvements, fixed guideway transit. Noting that MPOs, PDCs, and transit agencies are only eligible to submit projects through the HPP, do you support limiting the project types that are eligible to receive funding through the HPP to those listed here?
I have a question about that. So this doesn't affect the other source of funding that goes into Smart Scale, right? Whatever, I forget what it's called.
DGP.
Yeah.
District Grant Program.
Yeah. So this is just for the high priority program.
This is for high priority, the statewide funding program that MPOs and PDCs are eligible.
Okay.
Localities are eligible for both HPP and DGP, so this could affect locality applications, but obviously.
But for transit agencies.
Transit agencies, correct me if I'm wrong, but are eligible only for HPP, I think.
Yeah.
Anyone knows? I think it's just HPP.
Does this, how does
Yeah, it
this
does.
impact things like sidewalks?
Sidewalks would not be able to.
That's what I was going to ask is, is this going to kind of, reduce the amount of bike ped?
We frequently do projects that have a roadway improvement plus a sidewalk.
It wouldn't affect that. I'm assuming it would just affect projects that are bike ped specific projects.
And transit non-fixed guideway. So you're not going to have a better, but this will not allow you to do a better bus network. It will only allow you to do
BRT.
yeah. So.
And no amenity projects like bus shelters.
Yeah.
Because they're not capacity.
Yeah, I guess this is a question for VDOT, but would this preclude like a intersection project with adding turn lanes?
Well, it says improved interchanges, but that sounds like large interchanges, not just the local intersection. I would.
Has new capacity highway, but a lot of times you look at new road. Widening existing road.
I think a turn lane adds capacity.
So we need more information.
Yeah, I'm not inclined to support this. I would feel better if they said it must be a regionally significant project, because these are for MPOs, PDCs, and so on, transit agencies. So I would feel better if they said it has to show that it's a regionally significant project and not be so specific as to give a spun out list. That would be my guess.
I agree.
Yeah. So I think need more information.
Are we saying yes, no, or no opinion?
And well, my question is, to address, when they say to address concerns, like, are those founded concerns or unfounded concerns?
Like Hampton Roads. Now this
My suggestion is we say no, and then we talk about needing more information. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
literally like reads like all the stuff that Hampton Roads will get their projects funded for and nobody else.
Yeah. 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 No.
Okay. Couple more questions. 6, to address the concern about small projects with a cost of less than 10 million being funded through HPP, the CTB is considering adjustments of how HPP funding is allocated. The current funding steps are: step 1 allocates each VDOT construction district's grant program funding on a district-wide basis. Step 2 allocates HPP funding on a district-wide basis for projects that would have been funded through each district's grant program if they have been eligible to be submitted through that program. Step 3 allocates HPP funding on a statewide basis. The proposed change would eliminate the current step 2 and would move from step 1 to step 3. Do you support eliminating the current second step of the funding allocation approach?
Yes.
This basically shifts HPP allocation to wherever is the most deserving project, even if there's not a district balance like there would have been in the past, right?
I agree with it. I don't know what other people think, but
Yeah, I think we're probably better off with yes.
Okay, Bassam, you happy with that? Okay,
It all goes to
yes.
It doesn't help us, you know, you know. I think regionally it makes sense. It just does not help the city for any of our projects. So even if we wanted to say no, right now it's like 2 to 1. So I get it. We'll get there.
Okay, we'll say yes. Next.
Yeah, okay with that.
I want to try and get through the
We think regionally.
land use coordination. Land use coordination is a scoring criteria to evaluate applications. The goal of land use coordination measure, as stated in SMART scales, to improve consistency of the connection between local comprehensive plan goals for transportation efficient land use and transportation infrastructure design, multimodal cooperation, and system operations. Concerns raised about current use of land use score is that it accounts for where a project is located, not expected project outcomes. There is also concern that the land use score has disproportionately driven the types of projects that are selected for funding. To address these concerns, the CTB is considering a change to eliminate land use as a standalone score. Instead, the CTB is considering an adjustment to use land use scoring factor as a multiplier. The calculated land use benefit would be converted to a multiplier and would be multiplied against other calculated project benefits to enhance overall project benefits determined by the other scoring factors. Support the proposed change to the application.
Depends on how big.
What worries me about this is that we don't have any modeling to show what the impact of this is going to be.
we do.
We do.
Yeah, when they presented all of these changes, they presented it, I believe, with round 5 results. They showed how the number of projects shifted. So they rescored everything.
And
Those
what
results.
what do you think of the outcome?
I generally agree with the outcome. I don't see major.
What was the general gist? Like what happened?
The past 3 questions have been not funding. The gist is to not fund as many bike ped projects.
Okay, and that's essentially what ends up happening.
That's what this is going to do as well. It's going to reduce the number of bike ped projects. I also wonder about it supporting larger projects rather than smaller projects.
That's what I was thinking of. If you want to build the new tunnel, for example, the third tunnel for HRBT, like that's going to fund that project. It's going to take all of your. So if we do a bridge project or something like that in the future, or a tunnel, then yes. But if that's in anybody else's plans through the region, that's going to divert money because they're going to put in their calculation. The land use is going to divert to that. So I don't think it benefits us, but I will defer to the group.
So the original concern, as I understand it, was that projects that were just located in, let's say, a denser area, a traditional center, would have gotten a plus up on the land use score because they were already in a denser area?
Yes, and I'll add, I think one of the other concerns is that projects are being solely funded off the land use factor. There are projects that are not receiving very many scores and everything else, but they're being funded because of land use.
The bike ped projects typically get a good score on land use and
Yeah.
bad score on all the other metrics. So when
But then the land use overrides all the other
Yeah,
negatives.
so they're trying to reduce the factor of land use.
my worry is that if we want to go in that direction, this might be overkill. You might end up getting no bike ped projects funded.
Right, and they always had very good BCAs. I mean, to put in a mile of sidewalk or multi-use path is like nothing compared to building a bridge across Hampton Roads. So, I mean, I feel like they were like, yeah, I agree. It would be kind of over.
So you wouldn't get a HPP. Does this a metric hit HPP only, or does it hit all funding types?
This is all funding types.
Yeah, you see, you're going to struggle to get a bike path funded, I think, because this might be overkill.
Matt, what's your opinion? Since you
I-
looked at the changing of.
Generally agree with the changes, however, I agree that they are overkill. Bike ped projects or projects in general getting funded solely off the land use factor, and that couldn't happen.
I agree.
So that's the general sense of it. Whether this is the right way to go about it, If you look at the presentation, I think if I remember correctly, they got rid of most bike ped projects by doing all of these changes.
So if we shifted to this new methodology, and let's say you take the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel example, like how would not having the land use give them a better score? I'm just trying to think, like, how would this multiply?
Because if it's saying that you are, if concerns raised about the current land use, that accounts for where a project is located, not the expected outcomes. And this may not be what this language is saying, but let's say it's not where it's located, right?
Mm.
Located in the water.
But the benefit is to downtown Norfolk or downtown.
Now you have a $2 billion project that gets all the money because it benefits everybody.
Okay, I mean, because I can kind of see, like, from VRE's point of view, like if we came in for a big yard expansion project like at Crossroads, like that's in Spotsylvania, it's never going to be a dense area, but it's benefiting other parts of the region, you know, which could be positive. So,
Yeah, I'm not anti. I just.
but I think from a regional perspective, I think I agree that with the bike ped projects, it has more ability to harm the chances of those smaller projects that still give a good BCA in the end.
Based on the presentation, and I think it was all three of a bunch of these changes, but it went from bike ped from 51 projects to 13, highway 98 to 99, and bus transit 3 to 1. So it is mostly aimed at smaller bike ped projects.
But isn't the land use is the driving force for this? Why?
For bike ped, yeah.
Would it, put it as a priority in determining projects? This is where traffic is generated from. Because you need to improve it or wider.
I think what we would really like to see is take round 5 and run it both ways and just look at it and compare it directly so you can actually have a feel for how our projects that were applied for, that were funded, weren't funded, would have come out differently. I don't think there's enough information here to quite grasp that.
So I think the only thing we agree on right now is that more information is needed. So I think right in the comments, more information is needed, and then I don't know if you want to say no opinion, unsure, or what you want to say.
Maybe we should be unsure.
Yeah, and say a comparison between the old and the proposed methodology for round 5 should be.
So please click no opinion, unsure, and then put more information is needed.
Ian, could I have staff send out the CTV retreat presentation?
Yes.
I think you guys probably have it or know where it is, but that contains information on all of these changes and their effects.
We'll send it out. Okay, 8. To account for the elimination of land use as a standalone score, the weights for the other smart scale scoring factors would need to be adjusted. CTB is considering the following revision to the factor weighting. You can see them there. To support the proposed revision to the factor weighting as indicated here.
Wouldn't it be the same answer since we just.
Yeah, we just.
That's what I would do. I would put unsure and more information needed.
But you're saying the information is in the slides, basically.
Yeah.
Well, Stephen is saying that they should show both options modeled, and then we can compare the two and reach a decision.
Okay.
9. Do the following apply to the MPO you represent? My MPO is designated as a TMA.
You guys can.
There is a revenue generating transportation authority in my region. No. My MPO receives funding through CMAC.
Yeah, you guys should be able to fill out the rest of them.
My MPO operates in multiple states.
Press submit.
Well, our MPO is not designated as a TMA. It's a complicated. How do we answer that truthfully?
That's a maybe.
I think you answered it right.
Can you check half of the box?
Okay, just leave the rest, I think. The last question. There are 2 different tiers for MPO based on population. The tier the MPO is used to determine the number of applications they are eligible to submit. Tier 1 MPO is population less than 100. Tier 2 indicate which tier your MPO is. Tier 1. Done. Thank you very much, everyone. We will submit those on your behalf. I think we just did.
That works. All right, moving on to item 7D, TDM or travel demand model, transportation demand update.
All right, while Connor's bringing that up, we're here today to update you on the status and progress made on the FAMPO travel demand model update. VDOT and the traffic engineering consultant, WRA, are managing the project with input from staff and the FAMPO jurisdictions. Next slide. Staff reviewed VDOT monthly data information for over 300 projects to screen those that are or will provide road widenings or build new roads. Other steps completed are listed on this slide. Next slide. Heavy lift began in April with draft TAS boundary maps shared with localities to review recommended adjustments to the former TAS boundaries. Next slide. This gives perspective on the detail that our local partners examined to help adjust the TAS boundaries and roads in the model to reflect real-world traffic patterns and development type within each traffic area zone. Next slide. Input from local partners resulted in the new TAS boundaries to reflect the real-world traffic patterns and to align with 2020 census tracts. Next slide. VDOT's modeling and consultant team then did the heavy lift in June to adjust population, household, and employment data to each adjusted and new TAS. Next slide. All 5 GWRC local partners were provided a link to the new TAS map and a spreadsheet with each zone's household and employment values for determination if the TAS was built out by 2022 or is anticipated to grow after 2022, or whether the TAS is expected to grow at a uniform rate between the 2017 base year and 2050. I'd like to thank Connor Anderson, who helped create the TAS map that can be accessed by our local partners for this assignment. Next slide. We will be sending our transit partners a request for ridership, and the team is looking at September 2022 as our representative time for the information. We'll be glad to meet with you all if needed once you review the requested information. The updated model allows for new projects to be coded or added into the model once they are completed, such as developer constructed roads. Once the forecasting and documentation is completed, we'll have training, and that is likely to be in the spring of next year. That concludes my presentation.
So Becky, I do have a few questions. Karn, if you go back to number or step 6 of 6, slide 6 of 6. Yeah. So has there or will there be an opportunity to redo in whole the socioeconomic data that is inputted into the model? Because my understanding from this process so far is this is basically it. We're just moving some numbers around.
So they are using the base year numbers
The 27.
and the 2050 numbers. Well, no, base year for the model is now going to be 2022.
Right. I know this slide just references the occur since 2017.
So those numbers have been set.
Right.
But the intervening years between 2022 and 2050, they are they've used kind of an average calculation to give all the intervening years and put those into TAZs, but they're asking the localities now to propose changes where you think that that doesn't represent the real world, because you know that there's a new development coming on stream next year in a particular TAZ. So the answer really is your opportunity is now to make those changes so that we have the correct growth in the correct TAZs. Because, for example, the VA clinic, we need to make sure that in that TAZ we've got the right numbers for the future.
So the base year of 2022
Yes.
was set by the 2020 census block data.
Yes, they've used the 2020 census and then they've added a growth factor to get to 2022.
And in terms of the 2050 data, how are we going about updating those total numbers?
So they're using the numbers that the FAMPO Policy Committee approved for the long range plan.
I just mean in terms of the TAZ level. TAZ by TAZ.
You're going to compute that.
Okay. But
Well, I think it's already done, isn't it? It's been sent to you.
yes, and I have
So
some concerns about that data. That's why I bring it up.
I can't actually tell you how those numbers were divided up in the TAZs. I think it's based on I don't know. We'll have to do that offline.
Yeah, that's my question.
Just pop us an email to remind us, and then we'll send it to the consultants and ask them.
Great.
Any other questions on the travel demand model update? If not, moving on to last but not least, item 7E, CMAC SDBG project scoring recommendation. Dr.
So just before John speaks, remember where we are in the process. We've been meeting as a subcommittee for some time. It's becoming a little harder to get everyone in the subcommittee together because it's been going on for a while. So we would like to draw this to a close if we can. There are some items which subcommittee members felt that TAC should weigh in on. So those are the items which I think John is going to draw your attention to today. If we can resolve those, we can then move forward with the methodology. If there are items we can't resolve, we'll ultimately need to vote on those and then get the policy committee to vote on them. But let's see what we can do to resolve the last outstanding items. And they were requested, so they're on the slides for you to consider.
So we're not looking for a vote today, correct? We'll be looking at a vote in September.
If we can resolve them today, yes. If we can't resolve them today, then we'll have one more crack.
Yeah, and I'll actually go through that real quickly. So I am going to be interweaving some of the new changes that are made in the document, as well as some of the discussion items that have been requested, because in some cases, there are actually some changes that have already been in, and then there's additional items there. So right now, where we stand is that the tax subcommittee has been making changes over several months, and there have been significant changes to how the funding modes are operating, as well as the methods that we are going to be scoring on those. These including increased clarity, so we're being a fair bit more specific. Editorial changes, so there was actually a pretty large reorganization of the groupings, although the groupings themselves may have stayed, as well as some usability. Another main change is that we've loosened the screening in process of it, so no longer that our screening is more restricted than our scoring. And then we have reworked the scoring criteria and process for CMAC as well as STBG, kind of follows that process. So if it is something that the TAC wishes to recommend, we can actually take these changes before the policy committee so that we can actually have an open call for projects by September 15th. And in this, it will include the FY30 CMAC and STBG process, as well as FY28 and 29 for the active transportation. That's for Stafford County's TMA. So if it is approved, we're looking forward, this would be the calendar. But we've also made a couple of changes to the process. So we're actually recommending that the CMAC STBG call for projects would be on a 2-year cycle. So every other year, we'll be asking the TAC to recommend to table that money for the next year so we can distribute 2 years at a time. So this year will be just the last of the 1 year at a time recommendations, and we've also changed the minimum amount of funding required to trigger that. So if it is something that you wish to recommend to the policy committee today, we can go ahead and work with the September 15th call for projects, and that we are required to have 10 weeks between that and the closing of the call for projects. So that'll be November 24th, and then we can proceed as calendar is traditionally. If it's something that you want to revisit next month, then we're going to have to readjust the calendar.
John,
Yes.
I want to go back. January, you state an allocations if possible.
Yes.
So my understanding from our discussion was that we would do allocations based on the prior year.
Well,
because we definitely will not have allocations, official allocations by January.
That's what we are getting at. The other item is that the methodology is pretty clear on this. It's going to be somewhat dependent on which applications are available. So with methodology, basically saying fund up to 50% and then move on. Really, the allocations are going to be for the top 2 scoring projects, unless there's a third one coming in there that's stinky. Well, our thing is that we could actually be still within our time period where we are screening and asking for additional information or changes. And if that is something that is within the cost estimate side, that might cause an issue for developing allocations because we might not have that, particularly if it's a question of whether or not it's going to fall under that 50% threshold or hit that. And so I might be in a situation where I'm saying, oh, the third rate project has funding and it's this, or it's not funded, and therefore I don't know because we're still in the process of working with the jurisdictions over a cost estimate as a result of the screening in process, or sorry, the screening meeting saying, hey, go back and redo that. So I'm kind of asking, putting that if possible is, it's going to trigger it depending on what else is kind of happening as far as the projects are vision. That's going to be a very tight timeline with the holidays. Yes.
In all years, you won't be, doing any programming under.
Mhm.
Will that also include like this year we did the river crossing and things like that? Are you doing no programming or just for projects, or that's a project, but are we defining who projects, what a project is, or it's confused for me?
Okay, so it'll be kind of following what we did in the previous rounds, where we were going to come to the TAC in the fall and say, we are expecting this amount of money. We're going to park that for the next round of projects. So in that case, probably not.
So once a year, we will come to the TAC anyway, because two things. The first one is we to decide where to park the money if we don't make the allocations anyway. You can't just do nothing. You have to at least have a resolution to say we will park it in the balance entry, or we'll put it on regionally significant projects, or what we're going to do with it. So once every year, we will still have a discussion at the TAC so that we all agree where we're putting the parked money, right? It can't be just left hanging. You have to make a decision to put the parked money in a certain spot. At that time, also, the second thing is that the TAC can express an opinion about unknown needs that have arisen, right? And so we can deal with that every year. So we can answer those two questions every year, but the intention is that we won't do a full score and a full allocation every year. We will do it every 2 years, which means we'll allocate maybe 12 million instead of 6 million, or what the number is.
So just to basically kind of piggyback on those points, basically would it be wise basically just to have maybe a little paragraph just in the methodology talking about what we do in the off year with the CMAC and the SBG?
Sure, those 2 points that I just made kind of thing in a paragraph. Yes, we can add that.
So, so if you're going to do studies or something like that, you're going to vote just at the TAC level to put those in, or are you going to put those through process?
We can't make any allocations without the policy committee. So if somebody wanted a study, they'd have to go to the policy committee. But what we're saying is that we're allowing the TAC to express an opinion every, say, October or whatever the month is, even in the off years, because they must first decide where to park the money. And secondly, if a special need arises, they can express that as a TAC. And but if that involves allocations, got to then start a proper process, right? So we can't do that without proper process.
Are all your projects going to go through scoring, or just localities? Like if VDOT can't put in for a smart scale project. With this new process, is that going to be the same for like Pampo? If y'all want a study that you'll have to put it through, or?
So we're going to get to that studies section, and there's points to discuss and decide on that. But yes, my reticence to FAMPO staff scoring FAMPO's own requests, right? So I have concerns about that. However, Richmond has done it because they've tightened up the details. The trouble with it is, don't want subjectivity into it. If you minimize the subjectivity, yes, then FAMPO can score FAMPO projects. But if there's too much subjectivity in it, then it just becomes a screaming match. I don't want to have that. It's all about the subjectivity. If we remove the subjectivity, then it doesn't matter whose project it is, you just score it.
Okay, so in the current draft language, we discussed the number of applications. One change was agreed that at least transit agencies should consult jurisdictions about proposed projects before submitting a list of projects and provide documentation of the communications. So this is basically requiring that any of the transit providers speak with the jurisdiction where the project is taking place, and at least can show that there is at least some level of coordination there. However, there is also an additional level of request and discussion. And Paul, you can speak a little bit more about this, but it would be currently there's no restrictions or requirements that transit applications have to be in certain jurisdictions. There is kind of the discussion item of a proposal that would specify that transit providers must submit one Fredericksburg, Spotsylvania, or Stafford County located project unless a jurisdiction declines to use the allocated slot. And just for clarity, I also brought up where the current transit allocations are, so folks can see the geographic distribution of that. So,
Can we actually just go back to the previous slide? I just had a question. So, I mean, this is kind of like just a minor terminology, but I think at least based on like the current methodology, I think it's not 3.11. I think it's like 3.22. But I guess I just want to make sure we were on the same page. It's like section 3.2 is talking about kind of FAMPO's eligible applicants. This is on the CMAQ.
mm-hmm.
So you're talking about the second line, or?
Yeah, the 3.11 and the 3.1, those are not the right places.
He's saying in the body.
Okay.
In the body, yeah.
Your header is right, but he's saying, I think.
In the new methodology, or you're referencing the?
Well, in the revised, or I'll say the latest and greatest draft, it's like 3.2.1 is eligible applicants. 3.2.2 is number of applications.
So I think it's clear that that was just a holdover from the last round.
Yeah.
Last time. So.
Might not be.
Is this administratively? Can you update it so we can?
Okay, so check the numbers. We'll amend those as necessary. Okay, so that bottom is a new item suggested as a partial compromise with this concern about transit agencies not consulting enough before submitting their projects. The next slide is an alternative proposal which this subcommittee didn't agree on, so it's brought here to the TAC to discuss whether you want that level of detail put in to the document, and there's not agreement on it at the moment. So in other words, the transit projects have to be one per locality. You can't have, say, two in one locality and none in another locality. And the question is whether we want to add this to the document or not. Spotsylvania proposed it. I don't believe Fred supports it, but anyway, there's for you to discuss.
Well, I'll just say off the bat what VRE would always do, in regardless of how the policy is written, is obtain local support for a transit project, a VRE project from the locality. So it's baked into our process. We have to get our operations board support, and local elected official support. So,
but you have two train stations in Stafford, for example.
Mm-hmm.
So this would preclude you in any round from applying for two projects in Stafford unless one of the other localities didn't use their slot. It's hard baking in that formula.
However,
question.
If Stafford, for example, thought that it was of county priority to do both of those projects in the same round,
yeah,
you could use one of your slots.
Yep.
So and we would, because the pot of money is order of magnitude very small relative to the kinds of projects we would be coming in for. Just historically, looking back at the numbers, what we've come in for CMAQ in other places.
And to add to that as well, kind of with this proposal and just transit projects in general, if we see Stafford sees a transit project as utmost importance, and neither of the transit services, or they already have other projects they see more important, but they're still supportive, we would submit it under our own application slot. If we see it as that important to us, we would do that. Obviously with transit agency support.
Yeah, all that to say, I meaning VRE doesn't really have a dog in the fight here because it could go either way, but I understand the ramifications each way. So I'm not going to speak for, you or the effect it would have on like Fred, but I just, that's how it would affect VRE
So
basically.
the thing really revolves around that word use, right? A locality can use the transit operator slots. Does sound really odd that a locality is using the transit operator slot.
Yeah. So before we go any further, I do want to give Jamie, if you guys want to make any comments in regard to Fred Transit.
Sure, I'm here with Craig. So Craig is technically the representative, but I will speak on this item really quick. So Fredericksburg Go is not in favor of this proposal. We did have a great conversation with Spotsylvania County to discuss our thoughts together on this, and we're basically in the same position. We have confirmed and affirmed that we need to and will in the future do a better job in connecting with the jurisdictions, requiring the local letter of support, regardless if it's in a previous study or not, and making sure we're consulting the jurisdictions. For the most part, historically, we have not really submitted any applications. Our commitment to Spotsylvania County when we had the discussion was if you've got a project and it's awesome and it's in our transit strategic plan or it's in our current transit development plan, we have every incentive to get good transit service that you support out there. But committing a slot to each locality is a tough process for us because we may be in a situation where we need to put something in Stafford and bus shelters, for example, and a route. And if that's the priority because of how we operate, then we need to do that. Some of that is based on DRPT currently has performance measures that we have to achieve to get certain levels of funding, and the feds also have some performance measures. So what we don't want to get in the habit of is putting out, even for the city, because if the city has bad routes, I'm all in favor of eliminating them. But if you have a not good service, you need to remove it because ultimately it affects your regional funding. So from our position, we have committed to all the jurisdictions, but specifically we had the conversation with Spotsylvania of meeting beforehand so we can prioritize projects, but we are not in favor of this just because it may conflict with what our transit strategic plan is, which is our guiding document from the state. So we agree with the previous language. But we are just not in a position to support this at this time since we're a regional service provider, even though we're a department of the city.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we concur with what Jamie said about the meeting. We had a good and kind of productive meeting, but we didn't agree on this issue. I'll say just the concern for Spotsylvania is basically it's a fairness issue. Right now in the existing methodology of transit agency could just have all three applications being one locality and basically the other localities wouldn't get any. We thought that this was one potential fair approach where it would be equity, each locality would get one. Sounds like there's not support from that from the city. I guess what I would offer is maybe a alternative to this, that maybe we change this. We do like the fact that kind of the proposed revisions do have a much stronger, basically, coordination aspect between the transit agencies and the localities. We think that that's a good thing, and I think we're on the same page with that. And I'll say, given that, changing just the transit TDM one, so localities could not submit to it, only basically transit agencies would submit to it. And there would be a restriction that transit agencies could not have three applications in the same locality as part of that. So that would be a change, but that's an alternative. So what we had suggested before.
I would.
Our desire is to have a fair process where basically transit applications are not all going to one locality.
Yeah, so let me clarify if I heard you correctly. You're saying that a locality should not be able to apply for transit.
Yes, and then basically the onus would be on basically the transit
So
agencies, and they have to coordinate with the localities.
Yeah, so I definitely wouldn't be supportive of that. As I just got done saying to Nick, if we see a project that is utmost important to us in transit, we are going to submit it for Stafford County as a Stafford County application slot. So that's not something that staff
No,
would be
I
supportive of.
don't think you two are saying the same thing. I think that you're correct. You have 5 slots, and any locality can apply for a transit project on one of those. It's 5 slots, right? You're not saying
Well,
that can't happen.
I
Or
was
you say
suggesting that, yeah, the localities do not submit basically to the transit. Basically, that's just kind of for the transit, and they have to coordinate with the localities.
what if a locality, in addition to what say OmniRide, say now Spotsylvania or Stafford wants to apply with OmniRide to get a new bus service, but it's not in one of those 3 applications. Are you saying that the locality may not apply for a transit project?
That was what I was suggesting, that basically the onus would be on the transit agencies, but I guess the hope is basically with the strengthened language that they would coordinate with the localities on applications.
And your concern is that you just don't want a transit agency applying all 3 of its, let's say, CMAX slots into one specific jurisdiction. Correct?
Yes.
That's your concern, so that
Yes.
any transit provider can't just pick Stafford County, for example.
But wouldn't that constrain a particular jurisdiction from choosing, if let's say all 5 or all 6 or whatever of their projects wanted to be transit in 1 year? Wouldn't that constrain that ability?
Well, no.
It would.
Yes.
So these 2 things are separate. You can see them separately. So Paul's request that a transit agency cannot put all 3 of its projects in one locality. That's one issue, and that doesn't sound like a bad idea to me. The other question is whether you want to ban a jurisdiction from doing a transit project in one of its 5 slots. And I think that you're going to find it hard to sell that to localities. Those are 2 separate things, and if you put them together, fine, but you don't have to support both of those.
The first one that Ian mentioned, let's just go through this one by one. The first one that Ian mentioned, making so that a transit agency cannot submit all their projects in one locality. Do the transit agencies have any thoughts on that?
So are you saying, so this is the devil's in the details. I think it's too much language. I just say leave it alone, but we'll continue down this path of darkness. So my thought would be, if you're saying that, does that mean if it's multi-jurisdictional, then I couldn't have a multi-jurisdictional project?
In a locality. So multi-jurisdictional would be like, that would almost, if you have 2 Spotsylvania projects and 1 multi-jurisdictional, that's good to go.
Yeah.
But you can't have 3 Spotsylvania projects.
Make sure you put those words, like when I say like every letter you just said, I mean, I just think it's bad. I don't know. But I mean, if that is the will of the group, I just don't think the body should dictate what a jurisdiction can put into their grant. But I'm not gonna, for that one, I'm not gonna
Just go back.
ever.
Just go back 1 slide. So if we have this language in already, that there has to be consulting, and we add there that all 3 transit agency applications cannot be in the same jurisdiction, that already tightens it up quite a lot.
I won't fight you on this, but I would put in parentheses, unless there are no projects that can be submitted from that jurisdiction. So for example, if Spotsy doesn't have anything for us, or Stafford doesn't have anything for us, and we decide to do that, then I think we should be able to.
From the city. Yeah, I think that makes sense.
So I will make that concession.
Yeah, I'd also be
Okay with that.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Are we getting it? Look, Paul, we got half of them.
So can somebody read how that would sound?
It would say something to the tune of transit agencies should consult the jurisdictions about projects before submitting a list of projects and provide documentation of the communication. In addition, transit agencies may not submit 3 projects under 1 locality unless there are no other viable projects.
And that would,
Fictional projects do not count.
that answer would come out in the coordination. You would coordinate and say, no, we don't have anything for you this round. We'll submit them all from this jurisdiction.
Yes.
Yeah.
Good. That language. Are you good, Craig?
Yes.
Yeah. Good.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're good.
Yeah, the other thing I guess I just want to clarify in this is that basically FAMPO and GWC cannot submit basically CMAQ applications.
FAMPO currently doesn't submit applications for CMAC.
GWC?
GWC could contribute because we do have a TMA specific, transit/TMA. Sorry. TMA, what is it? TDM, thank you. It's gonna get there.
GW Ride Connect.
So if they are doing a service or request for a service, they could potentially, and they are called out, I think, within the preferred modes of rideshare support within the score
So
methodology.
GW Ride Connect under GWC can submit for transit projects, and FAMPO can submit for STBG study projects.
Yeah, FAMPO doesn't submit applications for CMAC ever, and it can stay like that. We don't need.
Yep.
You don't need
So
to do.
when we like develop this methodology, I think initially like we debated this a lot, and basically we in the 50,000 to GW Ride Connect, which we support, but they weren't supposed to be able to also apply for additional funding. Now, also with the 50,000, kind of we think that should be indexed to inflation. We have maybe an idea for how to do that, but we don't think that it's a good situation in any situation. It's not just GW Ride Connect or GWC staff to be applying for kind of CMAC or STBG funding. And then GWC staff is also scoring the projects. We think that that's a situation we want to avoid that.
So just stopping right there, Paul, as long as the process is transparent, there is no issue with that. As long as we can understand how projects are scored and the projects are not subjective, there's no issue with GWC staff scoring GWC applications.
Seems like a conflict of interest.
As long as it's transparent and there's no subjectivity to the process.
I mean, when you look at basically kind of, NVTC, the 395.95 commuter choice program, they don't submit applications for that.
Right.
With VDOT, they don't submit applications.
VDOT does submit applications for Smart Scale though.
CTP
does.
And
not VDOT.
well, Richmond does. Richmond, the MPO is allowed to apply for, well, it's for studies, so it's not CMAC, it's STGB. But most, well, I mustn't say most, I know a number of MPOs, for example, that are given an off-the-top allocation. They don't apply for individual projects. They're just given an. We cancelled that before my time, and now it's going to be reintroduced in whatever the year is. 27 or 28 as an off the top. So, I mean, I'm happy for FAMPO not to be able to submit individual CMAC applications at all because we're getting an off the top, and we're going to discuss just now the STGB for studies, how that could or couldn't work. So I'm in terms of FAMPO, I'm happy. GWRC is a slightly different animal. They're going to get the 50,000 off the top. And now we're talking about an inflation index. That's not in the policy. We would have to add that. And Paul is saying they shouldn't be allowed to apply for additional over the 50. The current version of the methodology reads that they will get a 50,000 off the top allocation. And then if there was another crisis and they submitted documentation, that would have to be considered by the TAC and the policy committee for approval if such a situation occurred. And the key thing that they don't have from other sources is money for computers and stuff like that, office equipment. They get zero from anybody to do that. So that's the one, I know one of the things that they definitely need, but I can't speak on their behalf. I'm just telling you what I know.
In terms of indexing their projects to inflation for GW Connect and FAMPO, honestly, can it just go by how much CMAC increases every year? It increases by 2%-ish generally.
If you want your allocations in January, that's going to be another layer.
Again, allocations in January are just based off of the previous year.
So Matt is suggesting that the same percentage the total increases by should be the same percentage that the
GW Connect 50,000 and the
FAMPO money gets increased by as a percent on a percentage basis, not on a dollar basis.
I think that makes sense.
I say I would be okay with that, and just would add basically that it has to be at least 50,000, so it can't go down.
Okay.
Yeah, so it increases by about 2% per year.
Do you want to ask if everybody's okay with that. And
Does anybody have any issues with indexing their GWI Connect and FAMPO allocations to just the percentage increase each year?
No, no issue.
No.
We can make that change in the methodology.
John, you go.
Does this have anything to do with, question, Mr. Chair, does this have anything to do with Paul's note about not, okay, this is a separate item. Okay, yeah, no, I'm.
Yeah, if we can move on, if we've got
Yep.
agreement.
Yep.
All right, in addition, we've been doing some revisions to project screening cost estimates. So right now we have a recommendation that roadway projects should submit a cube cost estimation database tool. With that, active transportation projects should use a cost estimated tool made in appendix. This was going to be generated by the TAC, and current proposal, there's a link to the full document, but it's setting up the basics. It's basically saying that if you have an existing VDOT UPC project cost estimate, you're good to go. If a project has a VDOT approved engineering cost estimate that's less than 3 months old, you're generally good to go. Cost estimate is accepted as is. Project has a VDOT approved cost estimate between 3 months and 3 years old. It would need to be brought back into existing cost. If it's older than 3 years old, you have to kind of rework it, and then none above, you get hit with that. A cost estimate cannot exceed $4 million in funding.
Does VDOT have any thoughts on item B, the 3 months old item? How often does VDOT usually update cost estimates, that kind of stuff?
We have guidance about the paying cost estimates of repeating milestones.
Right.
And then submissions. We say whenever we're putting in their application, obviously want it to be as up to date as possible. There are some very robust guidelines on our external website. There are tools there. Reach for everybody who's in their cost estimating development. We would encourage you to use those. Cost estimating cube workbook is kind of the summary of your cost estimate. It's not really development, so keep that in mind. You have to have your back data. Put them up again. The sidewalk projects are never the easy ones. They come with a lot of nuances. I'm sure all of you have worked on one now.
So can I suggest something in the interest of time, that we just go back to your previous slide, that we accept this, and then the cost estimating tool, we continue to refine over the next TAC meeting, getting inputs from all of you. It's the appendix. So what we do is we say in the body of the methodology, you must use this, and the thing is in the appendix, and we work on the appendix over the next month to tweak that form. It's effectively an intake form of how you're going to score the bike ped projects. Cost. So if VDOT can look at the Paul suggested table and suggest any tweaks, if any locality can suggest any tweaks, we can deal with that over the next month. But if we put this in the methodology, it's then going to refer to the appendix.
Can we just change it from CEDB to CEWB workbook instead of database? Otherwise, all good.
CEWB.
So just quickly, the concern with just the smaller bike ped projects is just kind of putting them through the requirement for like a project that's out like 6 years that you may only get maybe $100,000 for, making them do like a kind of a full kind of cost estimate workbook kind of estimate to kind of lower the bar. There were some basically kind of applications, I think last round, that were just out because they didn't have that. So basically it was to try to develop a fair way maybe to allow some of these smaller projects to still go through. And I'll say basically what we proposed was not the only way to do it, but I mean, that's the desire of what we're trying to do.
Yeah. And bearing in mind, this is an internal FAMPO comparison between projects. This is not a cost estimate you would submit if you want to go to smart scale. The key here is that you can fairly compare sidewalk A with sidewalk B. That's the issue here. That is that you want fairness in the allocation of CMAQ and SDG money, not a full, heavy smart scale lift, which has got much more detail.
Usually VDOT cost estimate based on volume. you bring a small project, the cost is usually higher. So those numbers may be conflict,
Yeah.
Small project, higher number.
So Bassam, would you look at Paul's proposal and then within the next month give us suggested improvements if you can see suggested improvements?
Sure.
So what I'm trying to do is not have us wordsmith that appendix right now in this meeting. If we can wordsmith the document and then the appendix, we can still, over the next 30 days, just between us, try and improve the document.
And Basan, we may want to have a conversation with Spotsylvania County and maybe Stafford as well, but so that we're closer on the same page too, because Mike did say that that was his concern, that we build our own cost estimates and the beat out one for the smaller projects. Literally what you're saying is a little too complex for what is probably.
So,
Mr. Chair.
just one comment, and I understand what everyone's saying, and VDOT wants to confirm, but because this is CMAQ or STBG money, we will be required at some date to do a formal, or detailed cost estimate.
This is a policy for us to choose and allocate money internally.
I understand. I just want to make sure to clarify. We still will have to do a detailed cost estimate, maybe 5 years from now. But right now, you don't have to do that. Okay. Just make sure everyone.
When you get into construction, you can't go into construction.
Want to make sure everyone understands
Yeah.
that we're on the same page there. Okay.
Say, I think last time there were close to maybe 10 kind of like projects that were kind of submitted, and I think only a few were picked, so the majority of them are not picked. You go through all that work.
And then it doesn't get picked.
Yes, if it doesn't get picked, it's kind of a waste.
Exactly. And we're not trying to be more complicated than smart scale. Yeah, we're trying to be
That
less.
is the whole reason why they're trying to reduce smart scale applications. So.
The next discussion item it's very quick. Currently, any project that is having a cost overrun or request additional funding can request to get up to 10% of the funding. This comes before scoring an allocation. So the proposed discussion item is to remove this completely, and so therefore any cost increase, regardless of scale, has to actually submit an application.
So there are two, do you understand the two options? The one option is that an existing project can get up to 10% more money, and the 10% relates to the original amount we funded that project. So if we gave it 500,000, it could get up to another 50,000 if the cost increases, right? And we would fund that. But after the 10%, we wouldn't fund any cost increases. The question is whether we should do that, because the thing with this methodology is you have to give us as staff instructions on how to allocate the money. Right? If you leave a vacuum, then we have to guess, and then you don't like the way we do it, and then it's he said, she said, they said, and we're trying to avoid that. So we're trying to get a specific instruction to the staff as to what to allocate money to first and second and third, and then we'll just follow the system.
Nick?
Is the applicant required to eat up all their contingency that was baked into their original cost estimate, or?
It's completely based on how much money they request from FAMPA. So we can get them up. So if they request more, like a $5 million project can go up to $10 million, but if we're only giving $500,000, then you can only request up to 50,000.
Okay, so like let's say VRA came in for a $500,000 project, we had baked in a 10% contingency or whatever in there. Now we're really out of money for the base project and the contingency. We can still come in for an additional 10%, an additional 50,000.
Yeah, we don't bake in the contingency. We don't get involved in the contingency. You apply for X amount of money for a project. We give you Y amount of money. So it's not the full amount. And if the total project cost goes up, we will give you 10% of the Y.
Okay.
Not 10% of how much you need. It's got nothing to do with how much you need. It's got to do with, we gave you Y amount and the total project cost went up because of inflation or something. We can give you Y plus 10.
But if 50% more funding, what the methodology proposes, you need to resubmit.
You need to use up one of your slots and apply again.
So I know we talked about this subcommittee, and the thought was bring this back for discussion so we could talk further. I don't think I support this. I think we should keep in the 10%. There will be times when we need a little bit extra money rather than fully applying for a project. It makes sense to have some sort of contingency like this baked in.
So I guess, I mean, the concern that we had is basically FAMPO basically doesn't have the resources to fully fund projects.
Correct.
So
This does not fully fund projects.
I guess like, I mean, was this the one-off that we did basically for this past round?
So, no,
This would be every year when we allocate funding. Once we've done the scoring, now we have to implement the allocation of funding. And do we consider that since the last time we did this, projects 1, 3, and 9 have now gone up, we can then fund first up to 10% more than not the application amount, but the amount that we gave, because we don't always give the full application amount.
So to your question, this is based off of what the policy committee did update earlier in the spring, but it's then also been modified that says rather than if it's over the 10%, they have to come before the policy committee and they can kind of decide to fully fund that or full fund underfunded projects that no, you do actually have to go back and submit a project rather than cutting it to the head of line with policy committee approval. So we're saying go back on.
If we leave this, I would suggest an additional clause which says an additional one-time 10%. In other words, you can't come and get 10% every year until you build the project. You only get it once. So an additional one-time 10% is what I would suggest if you leave it.
I guess I'm still concerned. I'm just trying to understand what this means. We, for instance, this is something that we have a Route 1 South Point Parkway project, which I think is like $33 million. As I'm going to say, like $2.5 million in FAMPO funding on it. We submitted to this, say like it needs more funding. Basically, and then kind of 10% of FAMPO funding would be allocated on this.
Yeah, 250,000.
But I thought it was
Yeah, because
up to
I don't think like that's
minimum.
I mean, if there was an intent, for helping like in small project situations, I guess I would have thought it would have been like for projects that are already fully funded, not for business partially funded. Because I mean, if you deal with all the partially funded projects, then it's like you're dealing with the entire suite of projects, and I mean, you're going to kind of put all the money basically on existing projects, and there's nothing left for new projects.
So you want to apply the 10% only to fully funded projects?
Well,
But I thought we don't.
Well, if we do that, I'm not sure that that's good.
And I'm not sure FAMPA ever is going to fully fund a lot of projects.
Never will.
on the project submitted. Yeah.
I mean, there were a couple, like there was the Stafford study, I think.
And
more funding.
That's where this 10% helped that study, which is why I do not want to remove this option. It provides a vital option for smaller projects.
That's a different situation than like the situation I just mentioned. You have the $33 million project, and you have $2.5 million. And also there are a lot of examples of that.
Right. You want to cap it in a dollar amount so that it can't, give 250,000.
Didn't we cap it before? Like,
I thought it was 100,000. It was 100,000.
Yeah, I thought
It had a minimum cap, like it could, like if there's a project that was under a certain amount, it wouldn't be just restricted to like $10,000 or $7,000 or something.
So you want to make it up to 10% or $100,000.
$1 million is the cap.
It's $1 million. Yeah.
I thought we discussed
I don't think it
this
should be
before.
$1 million. Then we'll
I think
all.
so.
Didn't we discuss this before about 3 months ago?
Mhm.
And it was a cap, like $100,000 up to $1 million. Or
So we needed to do it then because we had to finish the allocations and we had no guidance. So we asked for that one-time policy decision.
Million is going to be kind of hard because you basically have to reach. So CMAQ and STBG both have a hard cap of just over about $5 million. So you have to have a project with both $5 million in CMAQ, $5 million in STBG, still have enough headroom in the lifetime cost to even ask for the $1 million. So you actually are you have like an indirect cap happening within the methodology that even if you already had $10 million worth of funding, requesting that another 10%, $1 million, you might already be hitting the cap of CMAQ STBG.
Yeah, you can't more than 1 year.
So it's going to be it would be a very weird situation.
But you can't get more than 50% in 1 year anyway.
50%, and in the lifetime, you can't go over like the
$5 million-ish.
$1 million. It's a calculation based on how much is available in CMAQ and SPG.
So you can get at most about 9 million on a project in CMAQ and STBG total.
See, we think if you have a partially funded project, when we're funding, you should be submitting a new application for that.
Yeah, if you want
some version of this.
If you want a significant amount of more money, yes.
Right. That is. So if it's
And that is the process. You're not going to get a significant.
still have to apply again.
So is the feeling that you want to apply this 10% only to fully funded projects?
I don't think that's easy.
I don't think it's necessary yet, but isn't
The purpose of this is to fund. You're not going to be able to fully fund a project. You're not going to get more than a few $100,000. There's only 2 projects. Maybe John knows this better than me. 2 or 3 projects with over $5 million listed. So you're not going to get a lot of money.
So then how do you want to cap it?
I'm saying that maybe there doesn't even need to be a cap. You're not. If a project, Market Street and Enon Road and Onville, I think each have around 4 to 5 million each. Those 3 projects would get 400,000 to 500,000 based on this. If you
I actually think that, but I think there are more projects that are over 5 million than 2 or 3.
In total cost, yes. In what we're allocating.
But not an allocation.
And this 10% is based on what we're currently allocating.
Yep.
So.
Well then, I mean, the easy way to fix Paul's concern is you pick a number and you make a dollar cap as well. 10% or $500,000 or whatever the number is. Because then that does away with Paul's worry, because then you've capped it. So you will not give an additional allocation to an existing project of more than whatever that dollar amount is.
So what's the theoretical maximum project allocation? You said 9 million?
Yeah, 9 million-ish.
So make it 900,000 or $900,000?
Which is the $1 million cap that we were at.
Well, just to, you know.
It depends on year. So that
Yeah.
dollar amount
It'll go up.
slightly move.
Yeah. So it's CMAQ say has $2.5 million a year. The max amount you can have on CMAQ right now based on methodology is about 5 million-ish, John. Same thing with STBG is about 2.1 million. So max you can have is about 4.2 million, which equals a little over 9 million total. But every year as that funding amount increases on CMAQ and STBG, that funding cap goes up a little bit as well.
But it's an average. So if you also
2%.
have like a 1 year big time allocation, all of a sudden, because it's an average over 5 years, that moves based on the year amount.
So I guess one thing about this too, so the last time there were quite a few examples of this. I think we should limit basically per locality how many of these requests you can make. Because if a locality has like 10 of them or something, that's take all the money.
So this doesn't, so my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, is that this step does not require a request. This is if VDOT tells us the project cost has gone up, we would then in the next round give it up to 10% of our money. But there's not a formal request.
Actually, I do think the jurisdictions have to.
Yeah. So we added in a request?
Yeah.
Is there an action that's taken?
You have to actually.
It's not action, but the locality has
Has
to
to
say
send a letter and say, I need it.
somebody has to say that they need the money.
Okay.
So if you sleep or don't come to the meeting that day, you lost.
Yeah.
I mean, Paul's concern is basically he doesn't want these cost increases to eat up
the new project fund.
application, and that's an understandable concern. So if you want to have this, and I do understand also the counter concern that you have these projects just need that little bit extra, you've got to then put in some caps to prevent it running away with all the money. And so this is the line where you add the caps, and at the moment it just says 10%.
Would the group be amenable to going forward allocating, if you come in for a $50,000 or a $500,000 allocation, just taking 10% and putting it aside in the year of allocation? And then that way, if you need it, it's already there. You don't have to worry about it taking it from future projects. If you don't need it, it goes back into balance entry and then.
Banfield does have
We put
set aside 5% set aside.
We set aside 5% each year.
So increase the set aside by 5%, and then that can cover this potentially.
So then what you're saying is that we have to add language here that says using the annual set aside, using up to the total amount of the annual set aside, which then means you have to decide which of these requests get the
That's
money.
based on the ranking, but
Yeah, you see,
Allocating based on the number over the estimate. That's not reality.
Yep.
Okay, no, that's good. That's a good point. That's a good.
It's higher and then they'll be the money on it.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
yeah, you got to be careful. You don't make it too complicated because it becomes a nightmare to administer.
I'm just trying to think of an automatic way so that like next year we're not having to readjust this because it got wonky or something.
I get it.
So what about the greater of basically either 50,000 or basically a 10% up to a cap of 250,000? So that would address the small project kind of cost overrun issue that I mentioned.
So up to 50% or
Up to 50,000 or basically up to the 10% up to $250,000 cap.
So if you have a project worth $75,000 and you needed another $30,000, that's obviously above 10%. That's where the 50,000 comes
We
in.
could get up to 50,000.
Yeah.
That would be a reduction from our current thing. I think if it's under a certain amount, the minimum you can add up is 100,000, right? Up to 100,000 for small projects.
what?
So currently, small projects that can't request up to $100,000 based on so projects under $1 million can request
Oh yes, yes.
100,000.
So the current
regardless if they're a $500,000 project.
the current language caps the small projects at 100,000, and the large ones it caps at 10%. I mean, Paul's proposal is basically saying up to 10% or
Or 100,000.
250,000. Is that what you said?
Well, basically, so 10% up to a cap of 250. So to do an example of this, you had a $3 million project, or say a project that needs $3 million. 10% of that is 300,000. But basically, you could only get 250.
I mean that could work up to an additional 10%, not to exceed $250,000.
Right.
So do you have any thoughts?
We just going poop. So I don't understand. I think I think for me, I feel like there are enough controls in the language to not make this an issue. So I'm trying to understand where we're falling off because $50,000 is nickels in our discussion. So I'm not trying to not understand what you're saying, Paul, but I'm trying to understand why we're off.
If we just forget the 50,000 for a minute, and we just have 10% 10% of the amount not to exceed $250,000. So you can get up to 10%, but the 10% cannot exceed $250,000.
Mhm.
That's the main issue. In theory, if a project's only funded through CMAQ right now, and it's fully funded to the maximum CMAQ amount minus a little bit of headroom, realistically, the most money that they can receive is $500,000. Now, if it's a CMAQ and STBG project, that's when it can consume up to $1 million. Do we just want to say you can't double dip? If you're requesting a cost increase, it's only up to the $500,000, and you can't try to claim that it's on both projects and claim there, if that's the concern.
So I think, Jamie, Paul, correct me if I'm wrong, but what you're trying to say is if every single locality, if Stafford and Spotsy each submit 10% requests for all of our projects, there's no funding left, correct?
That's the problem.
Yeah, if we don't have caps, so that Fayetteville together, I think there's about 5 million basically in regional funding, maybe a little bit over that if some money falls from the sky. But I'll say that if we start doing like requests where like, this project gets 900,000, this one gets 500,000, this one gets 700,000, then you have no money for new projects. So that's the concern there. We're not against like submitting an existing project with a shortfall basically as one of the 5 that a locality gets, or if a transit agency does, but we think that should be a new project application, not one of these automatic things. It just takes from the monies that are currently available.
So going with the theme of indexing to inflation, rather than 250,000, what if it was 10% of the yearly allocation? So if CMAC has 2.5 million, your max is 250,000. If STBG has 2.1, your max is 210,000.
That's fine. And what year would we do the out year?
Yeah, it'd be out year.
The year of the request.
Year of the request.
So the language that
I think we should have a consistent year, like it's the year of the request, it would be old.
so up to an additional 10%, not to exceed 10% of the annual allocation for the first out year.
So, I mean, in this clause, if it's requesting additional money, it would have to be a request for additional money in FY30. So.
It's the call for project is for FY30, so the 10% request is for FY30.
Yeah,
be 10% of that.
If you need money earlier, work with another locality, try to move some money around on your existing projects.
And just so everyone knows, so for the CMAC, it would be a little bit over 250.
Yeah.
For the STBG, it would be a little under 250.
Yep. Yeah, and it goes up X amount every year.
We're keeping the minimal.
Needs money. You might need it sooner than the out year, because it could be a project that's moving through the system into a phase, like right where.
When I
That was just
my final.
That's something that can be shifted around. We're just talking about the total cap in 1 year. The amount you get this year is no more than $250,000 basically, but we're indexing it so that it moves when the money increases, so does the cap increase.
Just making sure you're not writing that in your methodology.
That's the one thing I think we can trust FAMPO staff and VDOT and DRPD to massage between us to try and get it all in the right year. But this is just capping the totals.
Yeah, I'm gonna agree with that.
I'm sorry, say that again.
Just make one request for that. We can't go year after year.
So you can make
So it's a one-time.
One-time request for the project, per project.
Well, we're going to be doing it call for projects for 2-year grouping. You can only request it once per call for project. So it kind of cuts down on doing it every year. You're going to have to wait every 2 years for one opportunity for that.
Per project.
You have a project because you're moving to a phase. And this locality have funds for moving. That makes sense.
It does. Disagree with it, but it does. Yes.
Just,
Yep.
We gotta keep our.
Yep.
So are you, sorry, every time we speak, somebody introduces yet another clause. And by doing that, all you're doing is making the problem.
Michelle and I have talked about that one.
Because
No, I mean,
happens, and we have to give everybody the bad news, that we're the bad guys, and like, why didn't you tell us?
Yeah, there is a clause.
you need to speak, but I'm just talking about John introducing another subdivision of a subdivision. It's
John,
driving me
correct me
nuts.
if I'm wrong, but there is a clause somewhere that in this methodology that if a locality needs funding, they can come to TAC at any point, and we can try to figure out something.
Or you can swap funds, or
We
you can
can,
swap funds.
we can move money around in between, but we're only once a year gonna
We can't give you,
have.
without this clause, we can't give you any more money without going through ribbon applications.
Right.
This is the clause that allows us to adjust the dollar amounts a little bit.
I mean, at the end of the day, the policy committee can vote to overrule and move money somewhere when there's a crisis. When there's a crisis.
Yep.
How difficult is it to amend these?
Takes a year. It's been taking a year.
Have you seen how long it's?
Do you like volunteer for a subcommittee?
No, that's not what I'm asking.
You need
What
support
I'm,
of
no, what I'm
multiple
asking is
sources.
that, like, is it just an act of this body here, or is it a policy?
Policy committee must make a vote and allocate money, and then Susan has to get tip amendment, has to get the feds to agree to adjust the amount. So there's processes behind the scenes that you don't see. It takes months.
Okay.
So that's why we don't do it more than once a year, because it's just a pain.
But it's doable, right? So
Yes.
we don't. So it doesn't need to be perfect.
It's doable.
If a locality has a request, they can come to this body at
Right.
any point, and we can work through that process.
So but can we just agree this language now? Because please don't introduce more and more and more clauses. We just need to finish it. So they can request up to an additional 10%, not to exceed 10% of the annual allocation for the first of the outer years. And do you want to
For the
include
first of the outer years, just the call for project year.
the call for project year? And do you want to include, yes or no, the extra clause that you can only do it one time or not? That's the final thing. And then I really want to put this one to bed.
One time for the project.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is minor. I think we should save the last outer year. I think technically the call for projects should be for the entire kind of 6-year plan period.
Yeah, and I won't say last outer year. I'd say since we're moving to a biennial process, the last 2 outer years. Because the last outer year would be FY31 for a future call for projects for FY32. We're doing a call for projects for the last 2 outer years since it's a biennial process. It's parking the money.
Well, if it was the very last outer year, the number would be a little bigger. But if you want to do the average of the last 2, I'm not against that. I wanted it bigger though.
Because it's when you need your money.
Rather than constantly making a moving target.
It's when you're asking for the money is what I'm talking about, not what the money's being based off of. Sorry.
So you can't ask for the money in FY31 based on
the outer year,
exactly
5 and 6 years later.
You can ask for the money in FY31 based on the FY31 numbers, and you ask for the money in FY32 based on the FY32 numbers.
Again, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but it seems like it'd be better to have one limit, not to have like some different limits depending on what year you're asking funding for.
So if it's a biennial process, every time in the future when we have, other than this round, when we have call for projects, we're call for projects for the last 2 outer years. Meaning that there'll be a funding allocation request, could be a request for say FY31 or request for FY32. We can make it based off of FY32, that's fine. I don't have any issue with that.
What happens if it's a request in FY29 and there's funding available?
Then, well, is there funding available is the question.
Wait, back up. You say funding is available for an earlier year. Are you talking about a project that didn't happen or was re-released?
Wait, hang on.
Yeah, because
You're applying.
As for 1 year.
Wait.
There's an answer to this.
Don't overcomplicate this.
Yeah.
We have a call for projects.
Yeah.
Because we're going to do it every second year, we're going to have a call for projects for 2 outer years. Am I right?
Yes.
Yes.
So do you want to make it 10% of the first outer year or the second outer year or both, which would double the amount?
I thought the second outer year.
Just do the second outer year.
So the second outer year.
Yeah.
Yes?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes?
easy. Yep.
Done. Please, can we move on? Mr. Chair.
There's a longer discussion to be had, but we'll skip ahead.
Next slide, please.
And finally, this is the last one. In the number of applications, it's a question over how the city's process should continue. This is the current methodology available. It's a question of whether or not FAMPO may compete and or receive STBG funding. Currently, as it's stated, it's an action of the policy committee.
So what you're seeing on the screen is the current language.
I'm going to throw out a proposal just to get tax thoughts. FAMPO staff should submit during the regular call for projects. FAMPO staff should score their own projects. The process should be transparent anyways. Shouldn't be an issue with FAMPO staff scoring their own projects. TAC, have any thoughts on that? Because I think it was an issue that the study that was presented did not have a score. It should have had a score.
Yeah, I just think that that's a slippery slope. It's a conflict of truth. You have the same basically staff that are scoring the projects, submitting the projects. That's, I think, not a good situation to put staff in.
So which part of the process is subjective that staff would be making that decision on how to score the project?
Can I ask a question? Staff would not submit a project unless directed to do so by policy.
Well, there are some projects that are regional projects, and that's, if there were no regional studies, then the studies would all be driven by the localities. But this comes into play when you have studies that are needed for regional issues. Like the East-West study was a regional, it didn't cover one localities, one roadway, one corridor thing. Some corridor studies cross jurisdictions too, because there's a boundary, and if you want to study north and south of the boundary, you cross jurisdictions. But mainly this covers regional studies. Just as a matter of fact, I don't think staff have any intention of this next round applying for any money for studies, because we have two big studies that we have to deal with, and we really don't want to start any more right now. We've plenty of things. But this is a principal decision. What should the principle be? Personally, I don't have any objection to Matthew's methodology proposal because it's what they do in Richmond, right?
It needs a score, is my only
The
thing.
key thing, though, is that it's got to be objective. Like, if we can keep that's why I've been pushing to put more and more detail in here. So there's no room for interpretation. We just follow the list, bang in the numbers, and it gives you a result. When it becomes subjective, then it's hard to do that because you then, you know.
And if there's any, go ahead.
Most of your criteria are mostly objective. And I mean, they're mostly quantitative. You should have the scores for the group at the TAC. So the TAC sees them. All the systems, but I don't know.
And if
what would be the problem.
the whole TAC disagrees with FAMPO staff scores, TAC can just vote against it and not approve it.
I mean, I think the point I'm trying to make too is like FAMPO staff is not initiating necessarily the idea to apply for the structural study. It should be coming from FAMPO.
So what if the localities haven't thought of a particular regional need? Why should FAMPO staff not be able to identify that need and submit a proposal?
But you're not going to
So what's happening in
asking the TAC and the policy committee if they think that's a good idea, right?
Sure. For what?
So we're not putting in our own projects and scoring them without there being buy-in that it's needed.
Yeah, if none of the localities want the study, well, then there's no point doing it because it just becomes a pointless exercise.
I guess what I'm trying to say also is there is safeguards in place. It's supposed to be a transparent process. We're supposed to be able to understand how scores are done, objective, and if TAC doesn't like it, TAC can just vote against it, vote it down.
And the policy committee
And the policy
simultaneously can vote no.
Yeah, so I mean, at this point in time, this action is ultimately a decision of the policy committee.
So let's go back to the river crossing study. We think that probably should have been submitted by either Stafford or the city. It was submitted by FAMPO staff. Spotsylvania is strongly against it. That is advanced forward. Spotsylvania is close to half the region's population. Basically, we're kind of concerned about the process. We don't want this to happen again. Basically, and it seems like what people are talking about, that could allow that to happen again.
So we did get two letters one from Stafford and one from the city asking us to do research on this project. It didn't come like fell out of the sky. The letters have been presented.
And I don't think the population is an issue either. All of the STPG money comes from Stafford County. So the population shouldn't be an issue either on how funding is allocated, unless we want to go back to that discussion.
But we have a study that doesn't have regional supports. Without Spotsylvania's supports, the likelihood of the project advancing is very low.
How so?
Well, where you when you see, let's look at it, you don't have regional support for it. That could be kind of a just kill the project right there.
So if
you can do the study, but you don't have a way to fund it. Project.
So if Stafford and the Spotsylvania wanted a study done, a regional study done by FAMPO, but the city of Fredericksburg was against it, you're saying that the city should have veto power to be able to block it.
Well, Sam, in the way that FAMPO is currently organized, any of the localities has veto power. So yes, the city could veto it. They've blocked FAMPO before. Stafford or Spotsylvania could do the same. So if you try to advance something with just two localities.
Don't understand what you mean by one locality has veto power on a study.
It goes back to the quorum issue, basically, kind of example, you need to have basically a quorum including all three localities. If you don't have all three localities on board, then you can't have it. The city has done that. Other localities could do that as well.
So doesn't that fix the issue then? If there is one locality does not support it, they can vote against it and it won't move forward. They have veto power.
Well, it's not a good use of resources. If you basically kind of
Right.
spend $685,000 in a study, then it can't move forward.
I mean, there's a deeper question there. If any item, forget about studies, any item is presented to FAMPO and there's not a unanimous agreement, they put it to a vote and FAMPO goes with the majority decision. So if, somebody wants money for buses and two of the three jurisdictions vote yes, then we hand over the money for the buses. The fact that we have to get unanimous decisions on everything is not realistic. No MPO in the state of Virginia always gets 100% agreement on every issue. And then the majority makes such a decision, usually.
Didn't Spotsylvania tell they are going to change ramp on 95?
Yes, Spotsylvania did, but I'll say Stafford and the city at other points have kind of killed regional projects. So
I know.
Spotsylvania is not the only one that's done this in the past.
I'm
I'm just saying if you have a truly regional project, which this is, you should have the entire region on board, not kind of, 53%.
So I think that we have many occasions when we don't get all three jurisdictions on board. It's going to always be the case. Every second month, we have an item on the agenda where two vote yes and one votes no. Nature of MPOs. I don't think we're ever going to get around that.
So just going back to kind of this issue.
This is about regional studies.
Yeah, I'll say if FAMPO votes on something, okay, but basically this was kind of the FAMPO staff putting in requests.
Which
basically that the FAMPO kind of policy committee, I think, had not voted on at that point in time.
All right, so what about then? I mean, I don't agree, but to answer your point, what if we put in a thing that says that FAMPO policy committee has to direct that a regional project be scored and added to the pile? In other words, staff can't be submitted, the policy committee has to direct. But there, you still have the possibility you're not going to get unanimous decision. You'll get a majority
in
decision.
that case, basically, it would be like smart like CTV directing staff to basically put a mission in. So I think it'd be a little bit different. In this case, the application was put in before the policy committee took any action.
Well, the methodology says that current methodology says that staff can submit applications. We did the same with the East-West study. I don't think the policy committee had even thought about an East-West study. So we proposed it.
I think that FAMPO staff should be submitting applications.
So I think the proposal that Ian has on the table, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that Ian must get support of policy committee to submit an application. Is that correct?
Yes, but with the proviso that we follow the normal rules of the policy committee. I can't get 100%.
Yeah, it just needs to be a vote, just like the locality.
Just like any other
resolution
decision,
for approval.
If the majority of the policy committee says yes, add the project, then we go with what the majority says.
Mr. Chair, but I just want to clarify, they can submit a project to be scored without the approval of FAMPO, because the FAMPO committee is not gonna, if the project is a great project, they want to see it scored. They need full information. I don't think it's fair to say that they need to wait to get it submitted to see if they can have it scored, because it could be a bad project once it's scored and then it don't get there. So that would just be my only comment, that to move forward in the process, yes, FAMPO needs to approve it, but they need to see the scores if we're gonna score.
Yeah, all projects need to have scores.
Okay.
Now, that's my stance. For SDG studies, for the FAMPO studies, it needs to be scored.
But wouldn't be wasting of money. At the end of the day, one of the competitors veto. Wouldn't
There-
it be wasting money?
There's an independent utility in doing a study on a regionally significant transportation project, getting the results of that, and then deciding as a group. You know, studies don't have to pay for themselves, right? Like they could be, the answer is, this sucks, don't build it, you know, and then you make the decision. Or the answer could be, it's a great project, it'll have great return on investment for the region. You know, then it's a matter of going to the policy committee to make that decision.
Usually the utilities made up their mind already about the project. So why go through the process and you know at the end it's gonna be weak?
So my job contract requires me to advise the policy committee and to advise the TAC, right? And you can say, thanks for the advice, sounds terrible, we don't want that advice, we're not going to do it. That's the nature of the beast. So it remains my job to advise the policy committee and to advise the TAC and the other member committees. I must advise. And what if I feel that we need a regional, I don't think this right now, but what if I did think that we need a regional bicycle study? Hypothetically, I'm not interested right now in doing that, but let's say I did. It's my job to advise the TAC and the policy committee that we should do this. And then you will develop your own opinion. Right? No, we think it's a terrible idea. Then I'll say to the policy committee, I propose it, the TAC thinks it's a really terrible idea. That's my kind of role, my job. My job description says I must advise. And you know, and all of you have disagreed with me at least once. Many times, most of you.
So we're
Normal.
I disagree with
So-
you on this one, actually.
So as it stands, you're proposing that, oh, sorry.
no, please. That's what I'm going to.
Yeah, okay. Is that you would have to ask the policy committee to endorse a study, be done?
And then my second part of the proposal would be that it needs to be scored by FAMPO staff. And obviously scoring needs to be transparent and subjective, which my understanding of it is.
I'm okay with that. Can you just give me the order of events so that because I need to make sure
August or September, FAMPO staff asks for policy committee support, or November, same as when localities do it, asks for policy committee support to submit a project. And then it just goes to the regular CMAQ STBG process, or STBG process.
So staff must start by asking the policy committee whether this idea should be taken to scoring and everything else.
Resolution support.
Then staff must score the project to see if it's any good.
Yeah. Does anyone disagree that the project needs to be scored?
Yeah. I would say with FAMPO, though, they can make the request at any time. Just basically would have to go through, I guess, the next round of scoring.
Yeah. Yeah, you could do it right now for FY35.
Okay.
Does this preclude them for asking for a study at any time, though? Like, you know, how they did the freight one and all the other stuff? I just want to make sure that we don't miss on opportunities because we're waiting for something to be scored.
I don't think it does. I think
Okay.
anybody can come to TAC with a request for funding.
Gotcha.
And then from there, we can figure out if TAC wants to support that request for funding and how to fund.
All right, then I'm good to go.
That makes sense to you?
I just need to have a process. So anytime I can ask the policy committee whether they would support this concept.
Yes.
And then I would have to wait till the annual call for projects and submit a scored project.
Yes and no. Same as any locality, anybody can go to TAC and policy committee with a request at any point. How that request is handled is dependent on what funding you're asking for.
And direction from the policy
And
committee
direction
as
from
to
the
what to
policy
do about
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. And then the project, once it's submitted under a CMAQ or STBG round, it just goes through the regular process.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think we can, Ian, we can talk offline, but I think we can work on beefing up a little bit of the transparency of the process to help alleviate some of those concerns as well.
Sure.
So the language, just to clarify, Mr. Chair, the language that we're talking about in this 5 seconds, if they are submitting an application through the normal standard SCBG CMAQ process.
Yes.
However, the language that we've had in the past regarding how they can do their stuff, i.e. freight studies, still remains the same.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. This is just for if FAMPO staff is submitting for the call for projects.
Okay. Yeah, make sure that language is okay.
So I guess another comment on this, I say with the STBG, we may need to have further discussion on this. I say we do have a concern basically with a situation where transit agencies and localities are competing for study funding, same pot of funding. We think it would work better if just that transit TDM kind of portion of the funding just could also be used for studies by transit. So transit could go to that for capital studies. And then basically the studies under STBG would just be for the localities.
Either the
If
trans,
it does, it'll trigger that for STBG for transit going for studies, it has to be for the benefit of the team A. So I would just, because transit specifically says it has to be for the benefit of the team A, if you go after studies in that group, I mean, we can add that, but it will preclude a
From studies from every.
So we would be okay with revising that to let the study be anywhere for transit.
But he's saying the money is tied to it, so it's not even an option.
I would not be okay with that, as the methodology current stance says the transit money should be tied or benefit to the TMA.
Yeah.
And it should stay that way.
So with the transit TDN funding, yes, but
Right.
for studies, no.
Yeah, but we're talking about funding for transit and TDM.
Yeah.
We're talking about the, is it
Are you-
15%?
Can we clarify, are you saying that the percentage allocated for transit
Yes.
in the TMA should not be split up to also include studies?
It can, but the study has to benefit the TMA.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, I mean, if
That 15%.
study is the only thing in the TMA, it would score very, very poorly, but it would score, and if it's the only project or two projects in it, then you can fund it through STBG studies as applicable. The trick was it's geographically located at
The
time.
15% in
So
transit
you're
funding
saying that
needs to benefit the
studies for transit that are not linked to the TMA should be funded under the studies package?
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, the 15% of funding that is allocated towards transit should still benefit the TMA. That's how the current methodology is, so I wouldn't propose changing that.
No.
So the concern that we have is basically the transit competing with the localities for the study fund.
I would make a proposal that we increase the amount of study funding that is available. Change some of the percentages, so funding for studies. Because as it stands, there's 10%.
That's going to be about 200,000 a year, a little bit of.
So one regional study a year, basically.
Yeah.
And it would be a minor study.
Yeah.
Right at the moment, to get a study done for less than $50,000 is just
Yeah, you can't do it. Yeah.
happen ever. And if you want to do a larger study, it's hundreds of thousands. I've purposefully pushed the costs down on studies. Each individual study, I've tried to get the cost down, and we have succeeded by bidding, getting the costs down. But there's a sub minimum that you can't go below because it, I mean, you know, that's what it costs.
So just going back to the study kind of comment with the transit, we go back to the point that I think Matthew and I kind of agreed with, that kind of there's a transit study that's benefiting after TMA that goes into the transit TDM kind of category.
That's fine.
Basically, if it's not benefiting the North Stafford TMA, then it goes into the study category.
Yes. Yeah. As long as the transit money benefits the TMA, that's yeah.
I'm not asking to change anything, so.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't have any issue with the current process, but
Or rested it there.
Any sizable study is going to cost more than the 200,000. So just putting that out there.
So I'll say on the STBG side, there were, I think, some CMAC things which carried over, like the GW Ride Connect and GWC, I think, were listed on the STBG, receive kind of funding.
I mean, in theory, if that's a direction that an entity wants to take, they can receive STBG money. It's just they're not a normal applicant.
Where are the usual so there's a difference between what's federally allowed and what FAMPO wants. So where is the list in the methodology of what FAMPO wants to allocate STGB money to? Who are the applicants for STGB?
In theory, they can apply.
No, STGB.
So it seems like just with the eligible applicants, it should just list GWC. But the intent from like when we've had all the prior meetings with this is GW Ride Connect would go to the CMAC,
So
not the SVG.
So we don't want to look at who's theoretically eligible in terms of the legislation. We want to look at who FAMPO considers the applicants.
So this is like on page 8.
That's
So yeah, they're an eligible recipient, like they are federally eligible to receive that part of the loan. They're not an applicant, they can't do it, but should whatever case that the policy committee directs that funds to be derivative, they are an eligible applicant. I mean, eligible recipient, but they're not an applicant.
So that's the list that is relevant, because 3.1 is what is in terms of the legislation.
Right there, yeah. It's the very end, it's page 7 on this one.
That's page 7.
Since recipient, so.
Yeah.
It doesn't say applicant.
I think it should just say GWC.
What you see here.
GWC with the GW Ride Connect, because they are a transportation entity, we can't give it to the Go Virginia program.
Says in terms of federal regulations. So this is just what the law allows. If you want to know who is FAMPO considers to be an eligible applicant, you've got to go down to 3.2. Just scroll down to 3.2. So these are the ones we would give money to. The top list says who is federally allowed. This one says who we kind of allow. So we have a shorter list than the federal list.
So I get that, but like the list up above should just say GWC. GW Ride Connect is not like a fiscal agent. It can't receive STBJ money.
Very specific, that's GW Ride or GWRC through their Ride Connect program.
So just, I don't want to waste time on this. It's more just administrative nitpicky issue.
GWRC with the GW Ride Connect program.
I guess I don't see that it matters either way, Paul, what it states.
Well, Sam, on the CMAC, I think we clarified this, but basically it should be consistent with that. It should just say GWC.
But Paul,
they're the ones that can receive.
The point, Paul, is that this is just the federal what's allowed. So you can write 50 more things in there if you want. It would make no difference. The only thing that makes a difference to us here at FAMPO is the 3.2. Scroll down one more time. That's the list that matters. So whatever's there is what we're going to action. The previous one is just a general introduction of what is federally allowed. This is the one that matters. If we put GW Ride Connect in here, then they would be allowed, but it's not in here. So they are not allowed.
TDM project might not necessarily be under GWRC. So if that gets moved out and moved into other place, say under the NPO, which
don't complicate it. Don't complicate it. Please don't do that. Get back to my point. My point is, there are the eligible applicants. That's what matters. This page is what matters.
All right. Anything else on the presentation, John? All right. I think we have a list of items to come back to for the next committee meeting. Obviously, we'll need to make a decision at the next meeting to vote to approve if we are to do this in time for the buffer project.
I'm going to, the timeline will change. The application will probably be, what is it? The
September policy committee meeting.
September policy committee, which means that there's probably going to be the end of the call for projects is probably going to look into early January. The end of the call, I should say, the end of the call for projects will be 10 weeks from now. So let's add 2 weeks would be mid-December, plus the follow-up meetings. And I'm going to assume that a lot of folks aren't going to be available between the last week or two.
The policy committee is September 18th.
So
your slide lists September 15th currently.
Yes. So
that'll only be 3 days.
That is the last, but I have to keep, that's going to fall onto Thanksgiving. It's going to bump it back another week. And therefore, the follow-up meetings are going to be bumped back a week, and I doubt that late December follow-up meetings are going to happen on time. So we're probably looking at a full month drop as a result due to the holiday scheduling.
Why don't we talk at the next TAC meeting about the schedule, and we can figure out the details about when we want to open the call for projects and when it should be closed.
So what we're going to do is we're going to put these changes into the document.
Yep.
And we're going to send you the final document for the next TAC meeting to adopt.
Yep. Because the call for projects needs to be approved by policy committee anyways, so it would be September 18th.
I'm going to suggest that at the next meeting we also include a call for projects proposal.
Yep. That should be on there. Yep. All right. Anything else under CMAC STBG?
So I guess I would ask that basically just the latest version of this, based on basic discussions today, be sent out to all the TAC members to review well in advance of the next meeting. And we give some comments.
Yep. And I would ask that everyone please do give comments rather than coming to the meeting with comments, so we have time to discuss and understand. Correspondence?
And, well, do the correspondence, but after that, you.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Hold on.
You
Sorry.
want to come back to that tip
Item
amendment to see whether
6C.
Susan has an answer.
I don't have the river from here, I can't get that from central office, but the C about the dates, that's because we had your going through federal fiscal year closeout, and we switched AC funding, which is state funding, to federal funding, so that's what this is all about. It's simply, we're swapping out state funds for federal funds, and it helps meet our obligation for the federal fiscal year. So yes, the dates are correct.
Okay.
Susan says it's good. We're good.
Okay.
So we're gonna endorse that one?
Endorsing item 6C. There's a typo in it.
Resolution itself has the incorrect tip year. The tip block is correct.
Yes, the tip block is correct.
So with the update to the resolution for the correct tip year, do I have a motion for approval of item 6C, resolution 24-02?
Motion to approve.
All right, motion by Paul. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. On to item number 8 for funds.
This is just to do with our UPWP that has been approved by the Federal Transit Administration, and it's a letter which just covers all of these MPOs. So it's not specific to FAMPA, but just showing you that the feds have approved our UPWP.
Awesome. Staff reports.
On the accent office, there's going to be a $2.5 million cap on TAC project. New and existing, they're going to flag in the portal. Application, pre-application, and impact.
Thank you. All right, and then any other member reports? I do have one item. Oh, no.
I was just going to introduce VRE's newest transportation planning intern, Will Montgomery. He's going to be sitting in. I thought this would be a great introduction to the MPO process. He's certainly gotten a meeting's worth. But he'll be back in September and maybe October as well. So.
We're not usually 3 hours long.
We are.
That's welcome.
On another happy note, obviously at the last TAC meeting, Ms. Jamie Jackson was not present, but I do have a resolution thanking her for her time as FAMPA chair.
And a certificate.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Dave.
We can give this to you. We can pass it down, yeah.
When you're done, I'll scratch my name out and give it back to you. Thank you.
All right. Anything else before we close the meeting? Awesome.
Correction, sir, the date is September 11th, the start time is 9 o'clock.
Yeah, so the next TAC meeting is for 11th, 2023,
9 a.m.
All right. Thank you. All right.
No, this meeting we started early because there was a reason. It's when you no longer meeting. So what's, is it